A hush lingered over the red keep long before dawn, as though the very stones had paused to listen for approaching omens. Torches guttered in the breezeways, throwing quivering bars of light across tapestried walls and the glossy suits of armor that stood sentinel beside each arch somewhere far below. A portcullis clanked open to admit carts laden with fresh river fish and woven baskets bursting with late-harvest apples from the reach. The keep's scullions, thin as candles and twice as nervous, skittered like mice from cellar to kitchen, their arms piled with burlap sacks of saffron, cumin, and precious Dornish peppers that would later lend the wedding feast a hint of warmth. In her modest bedchamber overlooking the frost-silvered gardens, Sansa Stark watched the first pale slice of sun tip over the city's eastern rooftops. The hush in the corridors felt like the indrawn breath before a thunderclap, and it set every nerve within her tingling. She had not slept. Over the hours, the timbers overhead had creaked and settled, mirrors of her restless thoughts. The bedspread smelled faintly of lavender yet offered no comfort. She sat upon the edge now, bare feet brushing the floor rushes, hands clasped about her knees. A single candle guttered on the bedside table, haloing the room in amber, and beside it lay the hairnet of black amethysts that had once belonged to Magister Illyrio's doomed niece. Each gem caught the candlelight in a somber purple star. They had been meant for another throat, for Joffrey's, if what Ser Dantos had whispered was true. But war and cruelty and the fickleness of men's hearts had turned the world upon its head. Ser Dantos had come to her in the moonless hour between midnight and dawn, smelling of fear and sour wine, to press a different counsel upon her. The gods send us chances, sweet child, but never more than once, he had hissed, tugging at his motley sleeve until the bells in his hat fell quiet. Let the boy king live. His madness will burn itself out soon enough. Strike at the head behind the crown. Strike at Lord Tywin. Tywin Lannister, whose name alone was enough to chill the blood of half the realm, who forged kingdoms with quills and bent high lords to heel with a glance, was the very spine of the Lannister machine. Kill him, and lions would claw one another blind in the dark. Sansa knew the truth of it at once, knew it in her bones as surely as she knew her own name. And so she had taken the nets of amethyst, each tiny stone soaked in strangler, and with trembling fingers had begun to unthread the silvery wire. One gem may fell a boy, Ser Dantos had warned her, voice quavering. A man of Tywin Lannister's size will need 3. Now, in the sterile hush, those gems studded her palm like shards of midnight glass. She closed her fingers over them, feeling their chill seep into her skin. A tremor ran the length of her arm. She exhaled slowly, forcing the tremor down, burying it beneath layers of practiced courtesy. The great bronze bell outside the September of Baelor told the first hour, its deep voice rolling across King's Landing in measured waves. The city answered with a rising murmur. Shutters thrown wide, merchants shouting prices, the slap of boot heels on cobbles. A tap sounded at her door. "My lady?" came Shay's muffled call. "Time to dress." Sansa slipped the remnants of the hairnet into a small cloth pouch, snugged the drawstring, and tucked it into the secret pocket sewn within her sleeve. She stood, smoothing the folds of her chemise, and crossed to the door with careful grace. Shay entered carrying an armful of linens and Elaine's court gown of pale green and ivory silk. Her round face broke into a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Such a pretty color. You'll shine like a springtime rose." Sansa thought of winter roses, blue as frost, crushed beneath a dead man's gauntlet. Her answering smile felt brittle but held. "Thank you." They bathed her quickly in rosewater, scrubbed the sleepless pallor from her skin with soft cloths, combed her copper hair until it gleamed. Shay twisted braids about her crown, pinning them with little silver sparrows from the jeweler on the street of silk. When at last she was swathed in layers of silken green, Sansa stepped to the narrow window and looked down upon the city. Chimneys exhaled ribbons of smoke. Barges drifted down the Blackwater toward the bay, banners fluttering. Near the mud gate, a line of small folk already snaked through the streets, each waiting for a glimpse of the royal procession. Today the city would feast until the moon rose, and even beggars would taste honey-glazed ham. But beneath the clamor ran a taut string of dread, humming only she could hear. "Shall we?" Shay asked, adjusting a sleeve. Sansa nodded. They descended twisting stairs to the maiden vault, where Tyrion waited, swathed in russet velvet and a doublet of black worked with threads of crimson lion. He bowed slightly, one courtly gesture among many that made the small folk snicker behind cupped hands and made Cersei's green eyes flash with scorn. "You look beautiful, my lady," Tyrion said softly, and there was no mockery in it. "My lord is too kind." He offered his arm. She laid her gloved fingertips upon the cloth, lightly, for her heart rattled in her chest, threatening to shake loose. "Husband," murmured Cersei from the foot of the stair, her golden hair piled high beneath a crown of woven roses. "Try not to step on her gown this time. The poor girl tripped all evening at last night's supper." Tyrion smiled thinly. "I shall endeavor to be more graceful." Cersei's gaze flicked to Sansa, lingered. "The wolf girl looks pale," she observed. "See, you fed her, Shay. We wouldn't want her fainting in the middle of the feast." Behind the barb, Sansa sensed a probing curiosity. Was that only a queen's disdain, or did Cersei smell something amiss? Sansa lowered her eyes in demure acquiescence. "I thank your grace for your concern." Outside the hall, white-cloaked Kingsguard men in polished enamel stood straight as spears. Ser Jaime leaned upon one twin, gold hand glinting in torchlight. At his side loomed Ser Meryn, face half-shadow. The royal procession formed. Queen Cersei with King Joffrey resplendent in cloth of gold, Marjorie Tyrell in drifts of Bear Isle lace, dwarfs a horse, musicians clutching shawms and lutes. Sunlight poured through tall windows, limning each figure in molten light. Sansa walked beside Tyrion, counting her breaths, counting her steps, feeling the weight of the pouch in her sleeve as though it were a millstone. Inside the throne room, courtiers lined the crimson carpet too deep, bowing as the king passed. Joffrey drank in their adoration the way a thirsty man drank ale. He swept the room with a languid wave, practiced and regal. Only the spasm in his jaw betrayed that he searched for some unspoken slight. His eyes met Tyrion's for a heartbeat, ice blue, sharp as broken glass, and slipped past. "Come," he called, voice ringing off pillars. "Let us dine. I would see how many courses Lord Tyrell can fit upon a single table." Amid laughter and applause, the train wound through corridors to the Queen's ballroom, a vast chamber dressed in Tyrell roses and the golden lions of Lannister. Sun spilled through arched windows taller than trebuchets, setting the gilded mantel frieze ablaze. The musicians struck a sprightly march as heralds announced each guest by title, and shadows of dancing banners rippled across polished marble. Tywin Lannister awaited at the high table, seated beneath a canopy fringed with golden lions. He rose as Joffrey entered, stiff in crimson-banded armor chased with gold. His gaze swept the hall cold, assessing. When it lighted upon Sansa, he inclined his head a mere inch, dismissal rather than greeting. Tyrion stiffened beside her. "Shall we sit, dear wife?" he murmured. Sansa managed a nod. They climbed the dais to lesser seats near the end of the high table, beneath the swirl of a painted dragonfly chased by a swallow. Servants bustled, setting ewers of summer wine beside crystal goblets, platters of honeyed lark, and silver bowls brimming with sugared violets. The pouch within her sleeve thumped in time with her pulse. She glanced at Tywin. He conferred with Pycelle, one thick finger tapping the table as he spoke. A servant refilled his goblet. Another draped a napkin of cloth of gold across his lap. When had Sansa last seen a man so utterly certain of his place in the world? Even Joffrey's preening was but a child's mimicry beside Tywin's casual dominion. A fanfare of trumpets silenced conversation. Joffrey stepped forward, raising a silver chalice. "To my lady wife," he proclaimed, amber wine sloshing. "May Marjorie's beauty outshine the seven." Marjorie curtsied, dimples flashing. "And may your grace's valiance light the darkness," she replied. Courtiers echoed their toasts, gold and crystal ringing like distant bells. Among the clamor, Sansa leaned close to Tyrion. "I'm parched," she whispered, though her tongue felt thick as wool. "Might I have water?" Tyrion gestured. A page hurried to obey. While the boy poured, Sansa tugged at her sleeve, freeing a glint of amethyst. She let it slide between thumb and forefinger, the gem black as a starless sky. One breath, two. The page coaxed her goblet half full and withdrew. Sansa dabbed her lips with a napkin, watching Tywin speak to Grand Maester Pycelle in tones too low to catch. The Lannister patriarch's goblet gleamed at his elbow, rim sparkling with moisture. A serving maid bent to refill it. Tywin waved her off, impatient, eyes narrowing as Pycelle droned. He lifted the goblet, swirling the deep red vintage against the light. Now, Sansa stood, careful not to scrape her chair. "Lord Tywin," she began, stepping forward. She summoned a trembling smile. "Allow me to thank you for your kind patronage these past moons." Tywin's head turned, puzzled, perhaps amused. "My Lady Stark," he said, "your thanks, though surely undeserved, are accepted." Their eyes locked, flint and winter sky. She reached to steady the silver decanter just behind his goblet. In a single practiced motion her sleeve brushed the rim, no more than a whisper of cloth. Yet in that brush the second amethyst tumbled free, struck liquid, and vanished beneath the wine's dark surface without sound. Too quick, she feared. Too obvious. Her breath lodged in her throat. But Tywin had already shifted his gaze to a herald requesting orders, none the wiser. Sansa retreated to her seat on unsteady knees. The third gem yet rested in her palm. "One was not enough," said Dantos. "Two, perhaps. Three surety." She drew another breath, feeling the hall's warmth cling to her skin. Laughter rose near the Tyrell cousins. Silver spoons rang upon crystal bowls. The world spun on. Course upon course arrived. Lamprey pie infused with saffron, roasted quail stuffed with fig and mint, delicate pastries shaped like roses. Tyrion dabbed grease from his beard, eyes keen upon the dwarfs at play beneath the dais. Sansa waited. Each time Tywin sipped, the gem ground a little more to dust, threads of strangler weaving through his veins. She studied his throat, the measured pulse there. Nothing yet. Joffrey rose, demanding a war of wines. Arbor Gold versus Dornish Red. Cups clashed as knights cheered their chosen vintage. Ser Loras daintily poured for Lady Olenna. Pycelle dozed, chin upon chest. A hush rippled down the table. Tywin Lannister coughed. It was not a demure clearing of the throat, but a raw bark that scraped his lungs. He paused, frowned, coughed again, louder. Conversation faltered. The patriarch set a hand to his breastplate, as though the finely wrought steel had constricted. His cheeks flushed a dull crimson. Veins in his neck stood taut. A third cough racked him, then a fourth. Tyrion's goblet halted midway to his lips. Cersei's smile curdled like spoiled cream. "Father?" she asked. Tywin drew breath to reply, but the breath caught and broke. A strangled wheeze escaped him. His goblet slipped from nerveless fingers, struck the table, rolled, and shattered below. Red wine sprawled across the dais like spilled entrails. Gasps rose. Chairs scraped. Pycelle lurched forward, beard trembling. "My lord, perhaps." Tywin tried to rise, too late. His knees buckled beneath iron greaves, and the Lord of Casterly Rock dropped hard to one side, crashing through a platter of glazed boar. Meat and gold plates clanged to the floor. The hall erupted into chaos. Cersei screamed, a raw sound that peeled banners from the rafters. Joffrey shoved past guests, voice cracking with frantic orders. Ser Jaime vaulted the table, golden hand outstretched. Sansa sat frozen. The pulse in her ears drowned all else. She felt the third amethyst bite into her palm, sharp as broken promise. "Poison!" someone cried. "Fetch milk of the poppy. Clear the air!" shouted another. "It could be miasma." Tyrion, pale, stooped beside his father. Tywin convulsed, mouth foaming violet. Blood vessels burst in his eyes, spreading crimson veils across the whites. He clawed futilely at his throat, steel fingernails scraping skin. One heartbeat, two. Tywin's eyes rolled white, and with a final rattle he went still, limbs splayed like a toppled statue. For a moment that stretched into eternity, no one spoke. The high table, the chamber, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the slow drip of wine from the table's edge. Then the hall exploded in 100 voices. Accusation, fear, commands. Iron-shod boots thundered across marble. The Kingsguard fanned out, blades drawn, shielding the royal family. "Lock the doors," Joffrey screeched, his voice cracked high as a boy's. "No one leaves." Sansa's blood turned to ice. She closed her fingers over the third gem, crumbling it to powder. The pouch in her sleeve felt suddenly weightless. Tyrion's mismatched gaze darted across diners, lingered upon her for a flicker. Question, suspicion, dread. She forced herself to breathe. Across the dais, Marjorie Tyrell pressed a hand to her corseted breast, eyes wide but calculating. Olenna Tyrell watched the scene with hooded calm.
Ser Dontos.
Where was Ser Dontos? Sansa rose. A knight gripped her arm at once. Another Kingsguard barred her path with a halberd. "My wife goes nowhere," Tyrion snapped, shouldering between them. "She is of House Lannister now, and you will treat her as such." The knight hesitated. Sansa's sleeve brushed Tyrion's as he turned. In that brush, she let the final traces of amethyst dust flow free, lost amid the folds. Cersei knelt by her father's corpse, her gown soaked dark. Tears cut rivulets through powder and rouge. She lifted her face to Joffrey, to Jaime, to the milling crowd of nobles. "Find who did this," she whispered, the words shaking with rage. "Find them and flay them alive." Outside, the first bells began to toll, low and doleful. Their echoes rolled over the city like gathering thunder. Sansa Stark, Lady of Storms, Daughter of Winter, felt each peal strike her heart like a warhammer. Her world tilted, but she stood, though her legs wobbled beneath silken skirts, though sweat chilled between her shoulder blades. The feast lay in ruin. Overturned goblets, shattered platters. The Lord of Castles in golden armor sprawled amid spilled wine as red as the blood that would follow. Overhead, banners depicting roaring lions hung motionless, their embroidered eyes staring down in mute accusation. And within the clamor, beneath the bells and the screams and the pounding of mailed fists upon oak doors, Sansa heard a quieter sound. The soft sigh of a vast wall beginning to crumble, stone by mortared stone. Tywin Lannister, the immovable cornerstone of his dynasty, was dead. The lions would roar, but who would lead the pride now? She lowered her lashes. Her part was done. The boulder had been loosed from the cliff, and no hand could halt its plunge. As guards shoved lords and ladies into rows for questioning, Sansa clung to Tyrion's arm, her face the very picture of shock. Yet beneath her calm mask, a storm roiled. Sorrow for the father she had lost, for the mother and brothers dead or scattered. Terror that the price of her vengeance would soon be paid in innocent blood. And somewhere, smoldering like hot coals, a grim resolve. Wolves did not cower forever. Sooner or later, they bared fangs. More bells joined the first, their iron tongues clanging out across King's Landing. The September of Baelor, the high tower of Maegor's Holdfast, the distant harbor bells that once told storms. The air shook with their dirge. In the vaulted silence between each clang, Sansa Stark counted her heartbeats and felt, for the first time since the day her father knelt on the steps of the Great September, the faint flutter of something perilously like hope. Smoke from overturned braziers drifted beneath the ballroom's vaulted rafters, dimming the chandeliers until every crystal droplet glimmered like a dying star. The floor had become a battlefield of toppled chairs, shards of gilt platters, and puddles of claret that seeped between the marble seams in slow, oozing rivulets. The body of Lord Tywin Lannister still lay where it had fallen, though 6 gold cloaks now ringed the corpse with spears crossed in warning. No one dared approach, not even Pycelle, who hovered just beyond the cordon wringing his spotted hands. The bells outside pealed on and on. Their iron throats sent tremors through the flagstones, yet inside the hall it was the hush that crushed. an airless, sodden silence broken only by Queen Cersei's ragged breaths and the quiet whimper of a Tyrell cousin who could not look away from the dead man's staring eyes. Sansa felt that silence in her teeth. She stood in the crook of Tyrion's elbow, her sleeve clutched tight within his paw, as if the dwarf feared she might vanish between heartbeats. His face had settled into the mask of the court jester he had never been, one brow quirked, one corner of the mouth drawn back just so. Yet beneath that facade she felt him quiver. Each time the queen's gaze swept along the high table, Tyrion's fingers flexed against her wrist like a trapped bird. "Stay close," he murmured. She dared a single nod. Above them, the banners of Baratheon and Tyrell twisted in the wake of a draft, but the Lannister lions hung limp, their scarlet silk darkened where candle ash had drifted down. Only then did Sansa understand that the ashes had begun to fall from the candelabra ropes. Tarred hemp smoldered where sputtering drops of pitch fell from lanterns kicked over in the panic. The very air smelled of tallow and singed velvet, as though the feast itself sought to burn the memory of what had been done. A Kingsguard helm rang like a gong as Ser Meryn Trant pounded the butt of his halberd on the flags. "His Grace commands order. No one speaks unless bid." He needn't have bothered. The crowd parted in cowed silence when Queen Cersei rose. Wine and tears streaked her painted cheeks, smearing rouge into bruised purple smudges. One hand clutched her father's dagger hilt, ornate, ruby-studded, still in its sheath, while the other swept toward the gold cloaks. "Seal the doors," she said, voice scraping raw. "Search every man, woman, and child. If a viper moves among us, I will have its head before nightfall." Joffrey stood just behind her, stiff-spined, knuckles white on the pommel of his long sword. He licked his lips, eyes jumping from one guest to the next like a cornered ferret's. "No one leaves," he hissed. "Start with the Tyrells." Marjorie's spine straightened, as though someone had pulled a harp string. "Your Grace," she said, soft but carrying. "We stand with you in grief, but my family came unarmed. Save our dignity." "Your family is notorious for hidden thorns," Joffrey spat. He pointed at Ser Loras. "Strip him first." Loras Tyrell removed one gauntlet with careful precision, then the second, letting them clang upon the table. "Gladly," he said, unlacing his doublet so swiftly that velvet buttons flew. "If it will speed you to the truth." Olenna Tyrell dabbed her eyes with a lace kerchief that looked suspiciously dry. "My poor boy," she tutayed. Always so eager to undress, the eldest Tyrell's quips snapped a brittle thread. Nervous titters flared among minor lords, only to die when Cersei's glare impaled them. The queen signaled, and gold cloaks waded in. They seized goblets, knives, silk reticules. They shook out sleeve linings and prized jeweled pins from noblewomen's coiffures. A hedge knight named Ser Balon Swan protested when they searched his boots. Ser Meryn cuffed him across the ear hard enough to draw blood. Tyrion watched it all with slitted eyes. He leaned toward Sansa. "Fools search pockets for a poison already swallowed," he muttered, voice barely a breath. "The strangler leaves little trace once it's done its work." Sansa's heart banged inside her throat. He knows. She could not be sure what part of the riddle he held. She had been discreet, so discreet, but some shard of suspicion glittered in him, raw and cunning. She pressed her fingers to his sleeve in silent entreaty, a plea that might have meant protect me or believe in me or simply not yet. Tyrion's arm stiffened, yet he covered her hand with his own, squeezing. At the dais' edge, Grand Maester Pycelle knelt over Tywin's corpse, frail hands shivering as he drew a stopper from a crystal phial. He dabbed a thin brush onto the stiffened lips, then frowned at the dark stain that spread, turning his brush tip black. "Your Grace," he croaked to Joffrey, "this is not a common draft. I fear the work of Shadowbinder's art." "Poison," snapped Cersei. "Do not wrap it in grander words." Pycelle hunched smaller, beard trembling. "I poison most foul, yet the how eludes me. 'Tis too swift, too pure." Sansa had rehearsed it 100 times in her head, but the hearing of it, poison, her poison, sent a slow chill sliding down her spine. She could feel each vertebra tense, a line of icy beads. Yet she could show nothing. The faintest tremor might betray her. Ser Jaime knelt behind the maester, his golden hand curving around the old man's shoulder. "Can you tell whether father drank it or was pricked with it?" "Drank, sire," Pycelle said. "One taste of wine to deliver the draught, and the blood seizes. I would wager any half-trained leech lord could do as much." "Name one," Joffrey demanded. The maester swallowed. "Many alchemists in King's Landing brew strangler when the market hungers for quiet murders. I keep a register, as commanded by the king's master-at-laws, yet ingredients vanish. Few would dare risk the wrath of House Lannister, until now." Cersei rose to full height. "Then the culprit is an enemy bold enough to strike here, in the Red Keep." Her eyes cut toward the Tyrells, then swung back to her brother. "Tyrion." The dwarf's grip on Sansa's hand tightened to a vice. "Dear sister, you wound me." "Not yet," Cersei promised. "But soon enough with the king's justice." She looked to Joffrey. "Command it, my son. Your hand lies dead. The realm looks to you. Have your uncle taken. He has poisoned once before." A hiss rippled down the table. Half shock, half hunger for burgeoning scandal. Sansa felt Tyrion's pulse hammering. He turned, his mismatched gaze sweeping the gawkers on either side as though memorizing each face for later. "The boy you loved," Cersei pressed, voice rising. "My poor Joffrey nearly perished at his hands. Will you risk your own blood again?" Sansa swallowed hard. She remembered that cup as well, remembered how Tyrion had been made scapegoat then. She had believed his innocence. She had to believe it now, for the sting of his fingers still branded her wrist, and without his aid she would not last the hour. Joffrey's sword rasped halfway free of its scabbard before Olenna Tyrell's cane rapped the marble 3 curt times. The sound rang sharper than steel. "My lords, my queens," civil tongues. She rose, frail-looking in layers of pale rose damask. Yet there was iron in the set of her shoulders. "Violence and threats will gift us only the wrong body to bury. Let the maester finish his tests, then choose the guilty with proof." Cersei's lip curled. "Proof? You would dare lecture a lioness whose father has just been slaughtered in her sight?" "I," Olenna said sweetly, "for the good of the realm." While the two mothers fenced with words, Varys appeared as subtly as candle smoke at Joffrey's elbow. The spider bowed low, bald head glimmering with sweat. "Your Grace, permit me to dispatch quiet men to every apothecary and cellarer inside the walls. If strangler was brewed, ingredients must be traced. Our nets will trawl wide." Joffrey nodded jerkily. "Do it." "And your Grace," Varys went on, "may I suggest your Lord Regent, Prince Tommen, be taken to Maegor's Holdfast for safety? If Tywin Lannister may be struck here, your brother should be protected by every measure." Cersei's nostrils flared as though she scented insult, but Tommen was her last unspoiled child. After a beat she nodded, and Ser Meryn hurried off. The search dragged on, and tension coiled until even the scullions trembled. Fires guttered out, platters congealed. At last the queen barked, "Enough! Clear the hall. Take the guests one by one to the Tower of the Hand for questioning. Guards at every corridor." Sansa stiffened. The Tower of the Hand, where Tywin had ruled, where the smell of charred parchment still lingered since wildfire had lapped the stones years ago. If they shepherded each guest there, they would find nothing save confusion. Yet confusion bred accusations, and accusations needed sacrifices. Littlefinger had once whispered that in King's Landing the innocent were sometimes punished for convenience alone. She could easily become so convenient. Tyrion seemed to read her thoughts. He leaned close, voice for her ear alone. "Follow my lead, sweetling, and speak only when spoken to. Do not tremble." A short laugh. "Do not tremble much." The procession began. House by house the guests filed past Tywin's fallen frame, skirts sweeping the wine, boots crunching glass. Tyrells first, then the great houses sworn to Crown and Rose, Redwynes, Fossaways, Meadows. When the Manderly's turn came, Lord Wyman's bulk had to be levered from his chair by 2 weary sons. He snuffled into a napkin, asking loudly whether there would be lemon cakes in detention. No one answered. Sansa and Tyrion stood second to last. Ahead of them shuffled Ser Dantos Hollard, hat bells muted with some black cloth that left his round face curiously naked. His steps were unsteady. Now and again he darted a glance back at her, red nose twitching like a frightened hound's. When a guard barked at him, he tripped and nearly sprawled. A tiny black stone skittered from his sleeve and clattered across the hearthstone. Sansa's breath froze. One of the gems? No, each of hers was powdered to dust or lost in Tywin's wine. Yet Dantos's eyes bulged as he scooped the pebble, stuffing it into his mouth with a panicked whine. Sweat sprang on his brow. Sweet child, chances come but once. He had swallowed his own salvation, and she still had none. The Tower of the Hand had not changed since her father's day, gray stone, narrow stained-glass windows depicting each of the seven, though the mother's panel bore a star crack through the halo where some riotous drunk once hurled a chamber pot. Guards stationed the hall, torches guttering, and outside, bells tolled on. Now the deep mournful bell of the Great September, now the harbor bell, now a host of minor chapels adding their clamorous grief until the city rang like an enormous iron heart. Sansa and Tyrion were herded toward an antechamber draped in moth-eaten arras. Inside waited Maester Balabar, Pycelle's timid assistant, along with two iron-faced inquisitors in black cloaks whose gilded keys denoted justice of the crown. Parchment, quills, and a rack of unstoppered inks nested on a trestle. Beside them sat a wicker cage containing 3 mottled pigeons. Each bird bore a ribbon cuffed about one leg, green, white, blue. Tyrion cocked his head at the cage. Carrier birds? Is the crown sending tidings already? A method, my lord, to test truth. Balabar cleared his throat. Pigeons drink readily. We lace cups, then offer each guest a draught identical to the one Lord Tywin consumed. If guiltless, no ill follows. If gill, a death lottery, Tyrion said dryly. And if the draught proves too weak, we kill only birds. Wasteful, though the small folk may thank you come supper. Balabar flushed scarlet, but a justice slapped a palm on the table. Silence. The Queen's decree. They began with Ser Dantos. The fool's knees knocked as they bade him drink. He swallowed, eyes darting from pigeon to maester to justice. The bird fluttered, pecked at the shallow dish, then cooed. A half-hour later neither man nor pigeon showed ill. Dantos wept with gratitude as they ushered him out. When the quill scratched next to Ser Dantos Hollard, acquitted, Tyrion snorted. They will keep scratching until those quills are nubs. The justice glared. Careful, imp. Mockery is another man's rope about your neck. He jabbed his parchment. The Queen's decree. His Grace's uncle last. Charming, Tyrion said, though Sansa knew he heard the true message. They saved their prime suspect for final spectacle. And Sansa? She had been tucked into Tyrion's house on marriage. Thus, by technicality, her name fell with his. Her mouth tasted of copper. The line shuffled, hours bled. The room grew stifling. Torch smoke clogged the lungs. A squire fainted when his pigeon toppled over dead. Another lordling vomited from simple terror. The bells beyond never ceased. At dusk, torchlight painted the walls honey gold, and a sudden volley of bells higher and shriller than the rest announced the sunset prayer. When at last the clerk called, "Tyrion of House Lannister and lady wife," Sansa's legs rebelled. Tyrion steadied her. "We'll drink," he whispered, "and we'll live." She wished she shared his confidence. Her stomach roiled with emptiness and fear. If the strangler's trace lingered upon her tongue, or the gods decided guilt without proof, one sip might end her more surely than any headsman's sword. A pewter cup waited on the trestle, brimming with arbor red. Balabar uncorked a tiny vial, let 3 drops fall. The liquid shimmered, darkening by a shade. A justice slid it forward. Tyrion lifted it, sniffed, grimaced. Vinegar, he complained, would be kinder, but he drank, dipping the rim beneath his beard, then offered the rest to Sansa. The scent struck her nostrils, oak and plum, but underneath something acrid. Her hand trembled. Tyrion's gaze held hers steady. She drank. The wine streaked fire down her throat. She fought the urge to cough.
Moments dratge.
The pigeon dipped its beak. Its wings shivered, feathers ruffling. Cooed. Sansa forced herself to breathe. 1 breath. 2. She counted heartbeats, 12, 2 dozen. No tightening in the chest. No waxen numbness creeping into fingers. Her pulse thundered, but with relief. Balabar wrote, "Tyrion, Sansa, acquitted." A justice scowled. "By the gods," he muttered. "Then who? Who indeed?" Sansa swallowed the iron taste of terror. If the test did not unmask her, suspicion would seek other shelters. But for now, at least she breathed. Yet as they were marched into a holding corridor to await the Queen's next command, Tyrion twisted to face her. His eyes gleamed beneath torchlight, 1 green, 1 black shadow. "How did you do it?" he breathed. Sansa's blood turned to ice. My lord." He drew her into an alcove shadow. "I know the strangler's taste. Father's cup and mine were poured from the same flagon, yet only his killed. Someone added the gem afterward. You stood closest." He lifted her sleeve where wine stained the shade of dusk mottled the hem. No girl spills wine on her wedding silk by accident. She couldn't recall the stain, yet there it was, dried into a dark blossom near her wrist. Her head rang hollow. "Sansa," he whispered, voice a low hammer. "Tell me true. Did you slay him?" She shut her eyes. The bells tolled. In that ringing she saw a direwolf pup gnawing Tywin's throat, saw Arya's dark laughter, Bran's fall, Robb's banners burning. She saw her mother's hollow eyes across a red river. "You could have freed us all." When she opened her eyes, tears rimmed them. "I did what wolves do," she said. Tyrion stared. Then quietly, wearily, he nodded. "Then I shall be your cloak of invisibility, wife. If you fall, I fall with you. So we shall not fall." He touched her cheek once, a gesture almost gentle, and stepped back as guards approached. Night spilled across King's Landing like oil upon water, black, slick, and flammable. Within Maegor's holdfast, torches blazed to life, and every arrow slit shone an ember eye. The small council gathered by emergency summons in the solar above the courtyard. Queen Cersei, Prince Regent Kevin Lannister, Grand Maester Pycelle, Ser Jaime, Lord Varys, and Olenna Tyrell, though the Queen of Thorns claimed only to speak for House Tyrell until mace could be fetched from his cups. Sansa was not admitted, of course, but she perched on a stone bench outside the door while Tyrion entered under guard. She heard only fragments through the thick oak. Cersei's keening fury, Varys's slippery counsel, the measured rumble of Kevin. Once, a fist thumped with so hard dust puffed from the lintel. She sat motionless, hands clasped in her lap, feeling each throb of her racing heart. Every path forward unspooled in nightmare threads. Joffrey's wrath, Cersei's cunning, Varys's whispers. Yet she also tasted something else lurking beneath the fear possibility. With Tywin gone, fissures would spread like hairline cracks through painted plaster until the wall itself sagged. A clever mouse might follow those cracks to freedom. Footsteps scuffed. Ser Dantos emerged from a cross passage, cheeks blotched, eyes bagged. He shook as he knelt before her, fat tears bridging his nose. "I tried to fetch you," he breathed. "They've barred the godswood, but at midnight the Blackwater Gate. I have a skiff, a friend with oars. We can be away to the fingers afore the sun." His breath reeked of sour wine and fear. Sansa placed a hand upon his shoulder. "Midnight," she whispered. It was too soon, too bright. Yet every hour she remained inside these walls tightened the noose. She nodded. "Midnight." Dantos bowed and tottered off. Inside the council chamber, voices rose. Sansa focused on each crack in the wood, each stretch of corridor behind. Somewhere above, a raven croaked. Perhaps ravens sensed death and gathered for it, as crows did upon a battlefield. She stood when Tyrion exited under escort. His face looked carved from wax, lips drawn thin. "Come," he said. The queen has decreed we remain confined to our chambers until dawn, lest we flee. Sansa inclined her head, letting helplessness paint her face. Inside, she scrawled midnight upon the walls of her mind like a prayer. Their bedchamber in the maiden vault smelled of beeswax and rose silk. Torches hissed behind iron mesh, but Tyrion waved them away. "None tonight," he told the guards. "My wife is brittle as spun glass." They left one torch stub and barred the door. The moment they vanished, Tyrion fetched parchment, quill, and a pot of green wax. "Write a letter," he said. "I will smuggle it out via Varys. Address it to your brother, the one who lives still." "Jon," she breathed. The name ached. "He is at the wall. Then the raven must learn to fly far." Tyrion flashed a bitter grin. "Tell him Lannister walls crack. Tell him what you wish, so long as the letter proves the Stark line is not dead." She sat at the table. Her hand trembled as quill met parchment, but the words came. "Jon, I live. Jon, remember the crypts, remember winter. Jon, I am neither Tully nor Lannister but Stark, and winter still comes." She signed Sansa of House Stark, Lady of Winterfell. The wax pooled green. Tyrion pressed his lion seal into it. Unopened, it states only that you breathe. Opened, it confirms Lannister treachery. Either way, it protects you, if only a little. "It protects us," she said. He laughed once, dry. "I suspect my family's name will not protect me long, even on parchment." Sansa touched his wrist. "Will you flee with me?" Tyrion's eyes flickered toward the barred door. "I will hold them away from you until the last moment," he said. "But two fugitives draw twice the hounds. If I stay, I slow their chase. Besides," he sighed, "I would rather die with a skin of wine than in a skiff." Tears pricked her eyes, yet she would not beg. She owed him more than pleading. She sealed her letter, kissed it, and Tyrion tucked it beneath his doublet. They spoke little after. Tyrion poured summer wine until his tongue slurred. Sansa paced the woven rushes, marking the crawl of moonlight across the wall. When the stub guttered out, they sat in darkness. Somewhere below, the bells ceased at last, leaving a void so vast the whispers of rats pressed in. Near the 11th hour of night, Sansa shed her shoes and gown for a plain wool kirtle Shay had once fetched from Flea Bottom. She belted it beneath her ribs, stuffing its hem pockets with the meager coin Tyrion offered. He draped a hooded cloak of maroon wool over her shoulders. Too fine, but in torchlight red might pass for brown. At the door he kissed her cheek. "I will tell them you weep beside me." His breath smelled of grapes and sorrow. "Go quickly. Trust no lantern that moves too slow." She nodded once, swallowed him into memory, and slipped through the postern Tyrion had picked with an iron hairpin. Down twisting corridors she flew, cloak whispering against stone. She met no guards. Orders had posted them at the keep's gates, not hidden sally doors. Moonlight silvered the frost upon the godswood roof as she emerged into the upper courtyard. Clouds scud overhead like tattered banners. The wind tasted of ash from 1,000 chimneys. Beyond the barbican, a wooden walkway skirted the outer wall to the Blackwater Gate. She padded along beams slick with dew, heartbeat counting the yards. Below the wall, the river glimmered black. At the gatehouse, 2 lanterns burned. A shadow shifted. A guard leaned on his spear, half dozing. Sansa ducked behind a stack of netted barrels. The water lapped softly. She waited, breath held. The guard's helm bobbed as he nodded deeper into slumber. With each snore she crept, silent as snowfall, until the river air washed cool against her sweat-damp brow. She slipped beneath the stringers, onto the narrow catwalk that fell by spiral, reaching a stilted pier. A single skiff waited, tethered to a piling by frayed rope. A cloaked man hunched over the thwart. Ser Dantos, or so she hoped. She whistled thrice, the signal the fool had taught her. The man flinched, spun, raising not oars but crossbow. "Lower," she hissed. The cloak's hood fell away, revealing not Dantos's ruddy cheeks but Peter Baelish's fox-sharp smile. Littlefinger inclined his head. "My Lady Wolf," he murmured. To rescue you from lions, I would sail through Sto. Rm and steel. Sansa's legs sagged. Dantos, where? Ah, our poor knight of the bottle. Peter's smile thinned. He came to me, swearing his love for you, begging coin. I paid him steel instead of silver. He lifted the crossbow. One quarrel. He died most loyally. Sansa staggered backward. Her heels struck a loose plank. Wood yawned, splintered. She caught her balance as Peter stepped onto the pier, boots soft. Do not fear. I shot him from behind. He never felt the puncture. You? She breathed. Why? To save you. He spread his arms, still gripping crossbow. And to claim you. Your mother, gods rest her, loved honor more than me. You, my sweet, shall learn pragmatism. Come. We sail for the fingers, and from there, who knows? The area awaits a new little bird. Moonlight lanced the water in silver shards. Sansa's heart hammered, yet a strange calm seeped through her bones. Tywin had fallen. The queen raged. Tyrion held a letter. Dantos lay dead. And here Peter wove new snares. She looked past him to the skiff. Beyond, the river flowed indifferent, bearing driftwood to the dark horizons. Very well, she said, but not at spear point. Peter lowered the crossbow, looping the string. I should have known you were steel beneath silk. He offered a hand. She approached 2 steps, then turned, swinging the hood from her shoulders. On the wharf above, the snoring guard stirred. The hood hit the pier planks with a soft thud. Peter's gaze followed it. In that blink, she closed the final pace and shoved with all the strength she'd summoned since her mother's scream at the twins. Littlefinger toppled sideways, arms pinwheeling. His crossbow clattered. His body struck the rail and pitched over, slicing into black water. A gasp, a splash, a swirl of cloak, then silence. Sansa stared. Ripples glimmered, then stilled. Moonlight danced on the surface like shattered glass. Above, the guard snorted, settling again. She exhaled once, twice. Her palms burned where she had pushed. Then she gathered the crossbow, slipped aboard the skiff, and loosed the painter. The river seized her craft, tugging. She set the oars to lock, pulled. Each stroke was a prayer. The red keep receded, a thorn-crowned hill against the stars, its windows like embers in a dying log. As water licked the hull, bells began anew. Faint now, alarm, perhaps, at the absence of a foolish knight and a trusting girl. She pulled harder. The river opened before her, a dark ribbon winding to the sea. Behind, the lion's den roared. Ahead, only the whisper of oars and the promise of cold dawn somewhere beyond the horizon. But in Sansa Stark's breast, a small wild thing unfurled its wings. Hope, tempered in poison and blood. She rode on. Moonlight pooled across the blackwater like molten pewter, turning every ripple into a sliver-thin dagger. Sansa rode until her shoulders burned, until the wind coming off the bay tasted of salt instead of river silt. The red keep dwindled to a crooked black crown on the hill, its windows dying embers behind her. The bells still pealed, but distance drew their fury into a mournful drone, the city's heartbeat fading with every pull of the oars. She kept her stroke steady, the way Theon had once taught Bran on the lake at Winterfell. Dip, pull, feather, slide, clinging to the rhythm because the night itself seemed to lurch if she faltered. The skiff was meant for 2, narrow-beamed and cranky. Peter's fall had rocked it broadside, shipping a fist of water over the gunwale that sloshed against her ankles. She bailed with one hand, rowed with the other. No lantern, that would be a beacon to pursuers. Instead, the stars guided her, cold, bright spears strewn across velvet. Somewhere above the haze, the ice dragon wheeled and Sansa fixed on its eye, the one her father had taught her to call the shivering star. Keep that star over your left shoulder, and the current will carry you east to the open sea, he'd said. She had been 9, perched on the battlements, half frozen but dazzled. Now the memory clenched her chest so hard she nearly missed a stroke. She rowed on. The river mouth widened. The smell of tar and fish guts thickened as she passed the quays where hulks creaked at anchor, their masts etched against sky like snapped lances. A trio of river galleys sat half-careened on a mudbank, hulls patched with copper where wildfire had blistered them during Stannis' siege. Sentries patrolled the nearer decks, torch tips bobbing, but none hailed the dark shadow that was her skiff. Wind gusted from the south, snapping canvas somewhere beyond sight. She shipped the oars, let the tide tug her beneath a skeletal boom chain the crown kept stretched at night, then bent to the oars again once clear. She dared not think of shore, not yet. But as stars shifted overhead, she began to count her breaths in High Valyrian, the way Septa Mordane had taught her to calm the mind. By the time she reached 300, a smear of dull orange glimmered low on the eastern horizon, the lantern fires of Driftmark or perhaps a fishing hamlet clinging to the fingers. Dawn was still hours away, but fishermen often left before first light. She would have to find hiding before then, lest some honest skipper deliver her back for the Queen's silver. A wave slapped the hull, salt spray in her eyes. She blinked, wiped, and saw the looming bulk of a merchant hulk half a cable ahead, riding high and empty, waiting for tide to berth. Halyards chinked against the mast in lazy protest. An idea kindled. If she could reach the anchor cable, she might cling there until the hulk weighed and then slip aboard unseen. Westerosi customs men rarely searched outbound holds, especially ones bound for the east where tariffs were paid in advance. She angled toward the ship, but no sooner had she dipped N or than a lantern winked a light on the forecastle. A voice called, a terse command in Lysine-accented common. Torches blossomed, stabbing the dark. Sansa hauled hard on the stroke, reversing. Too late. A grapnel hissed through air, clanged off her stern post, splashed. Another, the second bit into the gunwale, rope snake taut. Men hauled. Panic surged. She reached for the crossbow lying beside the thwart. Peters. She fumbled the lever, cranked. String jumped into notch. The coral was still slotted. Moonlight gleamed on the barb. They would see it as a toy in her hands, a child's last tantrum, but still the weight steadied her racing heart. Three shapes loomed at the rail, cloaks steel. A ladder rattled down. Easy now, the nearest called. Wouldn't have you tip, pretty fish. Come aboard and warm your bones. His laughter was all canine hunger. 2 steps and he'd be on her. Sansa lifted the bow. The men stilled. Shadows upon shadow, but she saw one raise his own crossbow in answer, drawing a bead on her throat. A game of mirrors, trigger for trigger. A soft cough of oars cut through the tense hush. Another craft nosed from behind the hulk. A long, low vessel painted dull green. Its single mast carried only a scrap of sail. Muffled rowlocks marked it as smuggler's work. Lantern glass, shuttered tight, threw one thin beam across the hulk's flank, and lit the prow figurehead, a carved onion with a sly grin. Sansa's heart stumbled. "Stand down, lads!" A gravel-dark voice called from the new boat. "Lower those toys, lest you fancy nursing quarrels in places I'd not piss on." The Lysine bandits hesitated. The crossbow aimed at Sansa wavered. Enor splashed. The green craft swept closer. Moonlight caught the helmsman. A stout man, bearded, salt-rimmed eyes steady beneath a hood pushed back to reveal scarred brow. He wore no sigil, no badge, save the plain gray of common wool. Yet Sansa knew him from tales whispered in Tyrion's solar. The Onion Knight, Davos Seaworth, smuggler made hand to Stannis and pardoned by Joffrey's peace terms, at least on parchment. The Iron Throne still listed him outlaw. Goldcloaks would have his head if they could catch him, which meant rescue or deeper peril. Davos raised a palm. "She's under my charter." He addressed the Lysini. "Take this and drink yourselves blind." A purse flew, clinking. A sailor snatched it. The crossbow lowered. Lines slackened. The grapnel released, splashing free. Sansa exhaled. Davos drew alongside her skiff, a hand outstretched. She stared. Wolf and onion, unlikely coat of arms, and accepted. The rough, calloused fingers closed around hers, warm as hearthstone. He braced the skiff, guided her across the narrow gap onto deck. "Easy, milady." He pulled the skiff's painter, tied aft, then knocked on the mast twice. The crew, half-dozen lean shadows, reshuttered the lantern and dipped oars in unison. The vessel swung, gliding away into deeper dark. Only when the merchant hulk was swallowed by night did Davos speak. The stranger himself must have steered me upriver tonight. He peered at her, the hood shading that earnest smuggler's face. Your cloak's inside out, poor ruse, and you're shaking worse than a hatchling duck. Sansa tried for dignity. Cold water. Her voice rasped. Thank you, sir. Not sir. That title's for knight's whole of hand. He flexed the scarred half-fingers of his left. Call me Davos. He offered a flask. She drank, salt, citrus, weak wine cut with lemon. Sputtered but warmth blossomed. Now, he said, tell me why Lannister ships sweep the river for a high-born murderess, and what sin they lay at Sansa Stark's door? The night reeled. She sagged against the gunwale. Word already flew like ravens with broken wings. She could deny nothing. Her name was the leash around her own neck. In the gloom his gaze was gentle, patient. She found herself speaking, halting at first, then faster. The poison, the bells, the test, Tyrion's aid, Littlefinger's menace, the shove. Davos listened as though each word were driftwood he might carve to fit a gap in his heart. When she finished, silence stretched, broken only by the rhythmic creak of oars. Whole realm'll howl for your blood, he said at last. Queen Cersei will roast a town a day until she learns you're gone. He rubbed his beard. But the girl who knelt beside Joffrey as he choked, she weren't built to shove men in rivers. That girl died long ago. Sansa stared at the deck boards. Do you mean to hand me over? A kingless knight I may be, but I pay old debts. Davos touched the packet in his belt. A shard of dragonglass bound with ribbon. Your brother saved the realm when he sent men south to hold the wall. I've no love for widowed lions. He sighed. We sail before dawn for Sisterton. Freight of arbor will cheap as sin. From there, White Harbor perhaps if winter permits. He eyed her. You'd find kin there. Wyman Manderly's fat, but he's wolf loyal. Sail with me. Hope, sharp and painful, speared her chest. To stand beneath a direwolf banner again. To hear Northmen speak the old tongue over hearthfire. Yet hope was a blade. It could open wounds thought scarred. She thought of Tyrion, of Varys, of the letter sealed in green wax, of Marjorie's uncertain kindness, and of the little girl inside her who once believed songs protected maidens. I will sail, she whispered, but I must send word before we go. A raven or a gull, if Sisterton keeps them. Aye, First Light will find a rookery tower in Maidenpool. He clasped her shoulder, gentle as snow drift. Rest now, milady. Tomorrow blows harsher winds. She lay on rough sacking beside a coil of hemp. Waves slapped hull, rocking her in uneasy cradle. Sleep stole upon her like thieves, yet dreams came red and loud. Tywin's eyes bursting, Cersei howling, Arya laughing in the dark. Through it all, the bells tolled and tolled. Tyrion Lannister sat alone in the cold, echoing chamber that had once been the tower of the Hand Solar, feet dangling from a velvet-pillowed chair far too tall for him. Candles guttered low. Moonlight traced the broken glass of a goblet overturned on rug. Guards lingered beyond the door, but none had bothered to bind him. Cersei preferred chains made of rumor. He was prisoner only to the hour, awaiting summons that would come with sunrise. A half-empty flagon rested near, sweet summer wine to dull guilt's sharp teeth. Yet his mind ticked restless, chasing loops. Father dead. Sansa fled.
Peter missing.
The realm leaderless save an untried boy-king and a mother sharpening grief into swords. And he suspect prime. If he did nothing, he would dance the strangler's jig from a rope come fortnight. Footsteps. The door opened without knock. Jaime slipped in dusty, mail shirt half-buckled, eyes bruised by sleepless vigil. He leaned on the jamb, stared at Tywin's empty study, and laughed, a raw splinter of sound. Father's ghost will flay us for this mess, he said. Father would flay you first, for leaving him to keep the king's peace while you chased some maiden's praise. Tyrion said, wagging the flagon. Drink. Jaime crossed, poured straight from flagon to mouth. He wiped his lips on sleeve. Cersei's commanded the city gates barred. Ships searched. She swears Stannis' spy poisoned father and whisked Sansa away. His gold hand clenched. But Varys claims a skiff missing from the royal pier. She might yet be in the sewers. Or leagues away, Tyrion said. Our little bird learned to fly. Jaime sank into a padded settle, head in hands. Seven save me. I cannot hate her. Even now. She was sweet and scared. Scared enough to plant Strangler? Doubtful. Tyrion sighed. But cause enough rarely matters in King's Landing. Only accusation. He fingered the wax-sealed letter hidden in doublet lining. Felt suddenly frail. Jaime lifted his head. Tell me true, brother. Did you do it? The question hung heavy. Cersei will slit you open if she believes so. If she doubts, she'll still slit to please the mob. Tyrion studied his brother's face. The worry lines deeper, golden beard streaked silver. I did not kill our father. He took another swallow. But I will not mourn him either. I mourn the realm he steadied. Without him, we're leaves on a storm. Jaime grunted. He said the same of Ares once. And now the wheel turns. History has a carnival wit. Tyrion rose, pacing. Listen, Jaime. Cersei's grief will turn Red Keep into a charnel house. You and I must steer the ship before she dashes us on rocks. You mean crown Tommen now? Tommen, Kevin as regent if he lives long enough. But first I must live. He halted before the hearth. Varys fears Cersei'll demand trial before dawn. She controls the judges, septons, even the headsmen if custom bends. I need escape. The tunnels beneath the city. Varys can guide if you look away. He met Jaime's eyes. Will you? Jaime looked down at his golden hand. I swore to keep the king's peace, he said at last. But Joffrey's dead. Tommen's a babe and peace lies bleeding. Go, save yourself. I will mend the pieces I can. Tyrion exhaled. Then fetch Bronn. Tell Varys midnight. And pray the bells tire soon. Jaime clasped his stump to Tyrion's mailed shoulder. Awkward, fierce, then slipped out. Tyrion drained the flagon and whispered to empty stone. Fly, little wolf. May your wind blow west. Cersei Lannister watched the city burn from the terrace of the Maiden Vault. Even though no fires yet licked the skyline. Torches marched the streets. Gold cloaks dragging men from beds. Hunting whispers. Each lantern below looked to her like an ember ready to set the world alight. She sipped dream wine, but the sweet haze could not drown the memory of her father's rattle. Footsteps. Qyburn emerged. Gray robes damp at hem, hands stained to wrist with something dark. He bowed, thin lips pink. Your Grace asked for truth. Speak. He presented a stoppered vial. Scraped from the dead lord's mouth. Strangler, refined thrice. Dissolves in ruby wine. A rare art, one only a master of venoms or a magi of Asshai might possess. I know of 3 practitioners in King's Landing. 2 are in cells. The 3rd sold his shop to a Bravosi days ago. His smile bared small teeth. We will find him. Find the buyer too, Cersei hissed. And the Bravosi woman, and the birds who carried tales. Silence the song before it flies. Qyburn inclined his head. As you command. She stared toward the river mouth. Black as spilled ink. Somewhere out there her enemy fled. Not Stannis, not Marjorie, not Varys. A slip of a girl she had once tried to pity, then despised. Now hunted. Wolves were easier in chains. Loose, they gnawed at soft throats. Bring me the head, she said, and you will find your citadel links restored, master. Qyburn's eyes glittered. My grace is your wish, your grace. When he was gone, Cersei clutched the parapet until stone bit fingers. Wind whipped her hair, scattering gold rings across her cheeks. She tasted iron where a strand cut her lip but savored the sting. Pain meant she was not yet stone herself. Father dead, but his legacy lived in her vein for vein. She would rule in his stead, guide Tommen's small hands upon the reins. and she would show the realm that to strike a lion was to die in claws and fire. The stars overhead seemed to shiver. Before dawn, Davos' crew made landfall in a shallow cove north of Crackclaw Point, a strip of shingle hemmed by pines. Mist clung low, gulls circled. They dragged the skiff ashore and camouflaged it under drift logs. Sansa helped. Numb with fatigue yet driven by fear daylight might find them still within the crown's fishing nets. Davos led her through pine shadow to a cliff track that zigzagged up chalk bluff. Halfway they paused by a disused watchtower. Its roof collapsed, mold on stone. Inside a rook cage hung crooked from a beam. 2 birds dozed within. Maidenpool's rookery lies past the ridge, Davos said. Faster to send from here. Fewer eyes too. He produced parchment, quill, a bit of charcoal. Write your message. Sansa unrolled parchment, but her hand hovered. Words were arrows. Loosed, they could not return. Who could she trust beyond Tyrion, already doomed? Jon at the wall, perhaps, but the raven might never reach that far. Ravens to the north had to cross war-racked rivers, wildling camps, winter storms. She thought of White Harbor Wyman Manderley, staunch to rob, rumored to fatten Freys for pies. The Manderleys still had ships, still traded. White Harbor ravens flew by relay. At dawn a rook could reach Moat Caelan's tower. She wrote, "My lord Wyman Manderley, the she-wolf you hosted once lives and begs guest right. Lions hunt north. The wolf seeks harbor. Tywin falls, winter rises. Hide this message in a belly. I come by sea." She signed only S. Davos rolled it, tied to the rook's leg, and loosed. Wings beat fog. The bird vanished into dawn's pale bruise. Another rook bobbed, unburdened. Sansa took new parchment, hesitated, then wrote, "To Tyrion of House Lannister, I have boarded the ship you named Hope. Wind willing, I seek white shores. The river has buried our secrets. Guard them well. If bells toll for you, remember snow still falls. Lady S." She sealed it with nothing but a smear of pine sap. Davos lifted a brow but said nothing, attaching the scroll. The second rook leapt skyward, winging south. A message back into the wolf's den, dangerous, perhaps foolish. Yet she owed him truth. If he survived, he would need allies. By the time they returned to the cove, fog had thinned. Crew loaded casks of arbor wool and merling spices onto a broader cog anchored beyond breakers. Davos showed her to a cramped cabin beneath the tiller deck. A pallet, a stool, a trunk of sailor's gear. He left a bowl of porridge, a wedge of cheese. "We sail on flood tide," he said. "Rest while you can." She ate, barely tasting, then lay. The hull's pulse under her spine whispered of vastness, of cold deep where krakens slumbered. She closed her eyes. Sleep slid over her like a blanket of snow. In the dank tunnels under the city, Tyrion crouched beside Varys as Bronn padded ahead, torch in one fist, sword in the other. Rats scuttled across their boots, squealing at light. Far above, bells had at last fallen silent, exhausted or broken. Varys whispered, "The fisherfolk at the mud gate report a skiff missing, but none saw the rower's face. If she reached open water, all the king's horses, well." He patted Tyrion's arm. "Hope, my friend. Hope kept me breathing in a box for long years." "At least boxes don't demand vengeance," Tyrion muttered. He ducked under a dripping arch. "Where does this rat path surface?" "A stable west of Flea Bottom. From there a wagon to Rosby, then Duskendale. A cog named Sun Chaser trades spice for Dyerden ivory. She owes me favors." Tyrion steadied a hand on the damp wall. "And you?" "I remain." Varys smiled thinly. "Spiders spin webs, not sail seas. Besides, I should like to see what flowers bloom in this sudden manure." Bronn hissed from ahead. "Voices." He snuffed the torch. Dim torch shine flickered beyond a bend. 2 gold cloaks patrolling the underways. Tyrion's heart hammered. Bronn drew dagger. Steel flashed. Varys tensed. But the patrol passed an intersecting tunnel without glancing down their branch. Footsteps faded. Bronn relit the torch from embers and grinned. "Fools never check the shitways." This city's bigger underneath than above. Tyrion exhaled, fighting the quiver in his knees. One day, he murmured, I'll burn these tunnels and watch the whole stinkhouse collapse. Varys cocked his head. Spoken like a true dragon, they pressed on. By midday, the cog's sweet sister caught a stiff east wind. Canvas-bellied, spray misted the bow. Sansa stood beside Davos on the quarterdeck, cloak snapping. Land shrank to a charcoal smudge astern. Ahead stretched nothing but dancing silver, gulls, and the faint outline of Sisterton's limestone cliffs, still hours off. She felt lighter, weight flensed away by salt and sun. But memory clung, a burr under cloth. Tywin's dying rattle, Tyrion's steady eyes, Jon alone at the wall. She gripped the rail until knuckles whitened. Davos followed her gaze. Sea is a road with no inns, he said. But follow it long enough, every road meets again. He squinted at sky. Storm brewing northwest. We'll hug coast. He glanced down at her hands. First voyage. She nodded. Pray it's not your worst, he said, and offered an awkward half-smile. Clouds stacked on the horizon, purple anvils. Wind shifted colder, carrying scent of lightning. Sailors reefed canvas, curses snatched by gusts. The prow began to pitch harder. Sansa's stomach lurched. She clung to rail, breathing slow. Water shattered off bow, icy needles. She tasted storm and felt alive. Storm clouds also gathered over King's Landing. By dusk, spears lined Maegor's walls. Pyres heaped in the courtyard as threat. Cersei ordered effigies of snarling direwolves doused in oil, set ablaze for the mob to jeer. Smoke coiled into bruised sky. The Queen Regent stood atop the barbican, skirts whipping, and proclaimed bounty. 10,000 golden dragons for the Stark girl, alive or dead. Half the city roared at the promise. The other half crossed themselves and whispered that the Mad King had risen in lion's skin. Below, Olenna Tyrell watched through lattice window and muttered, "A realm led by spite will soon dine on ashes." She penned a letter to Highgarden. "Prepare for drought. Lions gnaw their own tails." She sealed it with a thorn pressed in black wax. That night, the Red Keep erupted in screams as word spread that Tyrion Lannister had vanished from his cell. Guards throttled in silence. Cersei shrieked blame at Jaime, at Varys, at shadows themselves. Qyburn produced a flayed tongue in a jar, proof, he claimed, that the imp bribed jailers. Gold cloaks poured into streets, swords naked, but the city's warrens swallowed the dwarf like sand drinks blood. 2 ravens arrived at dawn. One bore Manderly sigil to the queen, polite condolences paired with icy denial. No Stark girl at White Harbor. The second carried only green wax, broken by Tyrion's absence. Cersei read the scrap, bland words of winds and snow, then screamed and ripped it to shreds. Far north, the third raven reached White Harbor's rookery. Lord Wyman Manderly read, smiled beneath thick mustache, and told his bakers to ready more pie crusts. On the Sweet Sister, the storm struck full come nightfall, shattering masts on black peaks. Sailors fought ropes, swore at lightning that turned decks white. At the helm, Davos lashed himself fast, eyes slitted against stinging rain. Sansa clung beside the mizzen stump, hair whipped to snarl, heart clamoring but fierce joy inside. Wind, thunder, wildness untamed. This felt like northern winter winds howling through the broken towers of Winterfell. A wall of water reared, crashed. The cog heeled, crates slid. Sansa slammed into rail, bruised, but held. Spray blinded. Somewhere a mast snapped, spar whistling into sea. "Bail!" a sailor howled. Men formed a chain. Buckets flew. Minutes or hours, blurred in roar and flash. Then, as quick as rage flares to spent ash, the gale passed. Rain softened to mist. Clouds shredded, revealing stars. The ship bobbed, mast stumps creaking mournfully. Dawn bled coral along the edge of cloud. Debris littered deck, torn sailcloth, split barrels, a tangle of rigging. No one spoke until Davos limped forward, patting his ribs. "We live," he croaked. Sail makes a sister of us all. Sansa sank to her knees, cheek to wet plank, and allowed tears to fall unseen in salt water. Alive, free, and the world would learn wolves could ride storms. 3 days later, the crippled sweet sister limped into White Harbor under jury-rigged sail. Harbor bells tolled welcome. Gulls screamed overhead. On the quay, Lord Wyman Manderly, flesh billowing beneath a cloak of snowy ermine, awaited atop a litter, flanked by 2 towering suns. Banners of white mermen on sea green snapped above. When Sansa disembarked, cloak salt-stiff, hair cropped by wind, Wyman bowed so low his chins trembled. "Lady Stark," he intoned, voice like distant drums. "Winterfell's hearth is yours. All White Harbor is yours. We have kept the north for you." Tears blurred her sight. She tried to answer but only managed a nod before words failed. Davos squeezed her shoulder, then stepped aside, head bowed. His debt was paid. Guards laid a fur mantle over her trembling shoulders. As they guided her up the pier, fisherfolk fell to knees, murmuring winter like a prayer, touching foreheads to damp planks. The gull cry mingled with their whispered devotion, and for the first time since the tall tower in King's Landing, Sansa felt the warm weight of home settle around her bones. Behind, in the harbor's dawn-pale water, the last ripple of the sweet sister's wake spread outward, ever outward, toward distant shores where rumor turned to legend and legend to song. And somewhere, carried on rising wind, faint, came the echo of bells tolling far away in a city of red stone, already fading into silence. Wind whistled through the high-slit windows of the wolf's den, rattling the iron grills like ghost fingers testing their old cages. Snow had begun before dusk, a gentle drift that powdered the white knife's frozen banks and feathered every pine along the river road. By moonrise it thickened to a steady hush that swallowed sound and scent alike. Inside the keep's oldest tower, Sansa Stark sat alone at a long oaken table where 100 candles guttered low, all but forgotten by the servants who had retreated to warmer kitchens. Their pooled wax ran like the folds of an uncharted coastline, rolling toward quills, scraps of parchment, a half-drained cup of hot milk sweetened with honey. She had tried to read House Manderly's ledgers, a tally of grain stores, the manifest of arriving vessels, but the numbers jittered beneath her gaze until every column blurred into the next. Words would not obey her tonight. They fled like mice into snowdrifts. She pushed back the carved chair, wrapped her cloak of undyed wool closer, and moved to the narrow window. White Harbor sprawled below in ink-dark outlines, its ships lost to the swirl. Only the harbor lanterns yet burned. 3 great braziers mounted on stone pillars, painted glass shields turning flame into muted garnet. Even blurred by snowfall, each watery flare rang bright against the deep blue dark, a beacon to guide sailors home, to warn raiders off, to whisper defiantly to every southern eye that might spy from afar. Home, she thought, and her throat tightened. This was not Winterfell. No hot springs steamed beneath these floors, no 9 carved gods loomed in a greenwood godswood, but here beyond the neck, wolf blood soaked every root and rafter. She could almost feel it, thudding beneath the flagstones like an old, slow heart grown still but never dead. Behind her, the chamber doors creaked. Wyman Manderly's youngest, Ser Wylis, ducked his broad shoulders through the lintel, the torch he bore slashing gold across the walls. He bowed with surprising grace for a man of such girth and muscle. "My lady," he rumbled, "my lord father awaits in the audience hall. The other guests have gathered." Sansa smoothed the skirt of her blue wool gown, a shade midway between Tully River and stark sky, and followed. Her slippers whispered over cold stone. They descended 2 levels to a vaulted chamber whose walls bore ancient sea-green tapestries of mermaids grappling lions and kraken in a storm-racked bay. At the hall's far end, Lord Wyman himself throned upon a straight-back chair carved like a cresting wave, his flesh spilling over armrests in folds of pale pink. Beside him stood Davos Seaworth in plain gray, and in a half-circle around them waited 6 men and 1 woman, northern lords and captains summoned by Raven that morning. Tall Benjicot Risswell with wind-reddened cheeks, Lady Barbary Dustin, her sable braids streaked silver, Howland Reed's daughter Mira, clad in water reeds and furs, and 3 grizzled captains of White Harbor's merchant fleet, their cloaks still dusted white from the yard. When Wyman lifted a pudgy hand ringed by a single jade merling, talk ceased. Sansa felt every eye upon her, weighing, measuring. The heat of the hearths did little to melt the chill coiling in her gut. Wyman's voice rolled like distant thunder softened by snow. "The she-wolf is among us," he intoned. "The blood of the north. We are met to hear her will and speak our own. For winter moves upon us and the lions bare their fangs." He gestured to an empty chair at his right. Sansa took it, heart hammering. She had known this was coming. For days of Manderley hospitality, of honey-crusted salmon, carved swan stuffed with onions, sweet wine stronger than arbor gold, had only postponed the council Wyman meant to hold the moment the raven named her alive. Now the hour was here, and every memory of King's Landing threatened to drag her voice down into a child's whisper. But she was no child. She was Winterfell's last wolfling in the south, and if she faltered, the north might shatter for good. Davos bowed his head toward her. "My lady," he said in that weathered, respectful baritone, "the realm believes you fled upriver a murderer. The queen's price on your head has doubled again." He held out a folded parchment clutched by wax. Cersei's latest proclamation, delivered by some trembling Tyrell courier and tossed into White Harbor's mud. The wax bore the red lion. Its broken edge still showed where someone, Wyman perhaps, had scored it with a carving knife. "She calls for your return in chains to face the faith's judgment. She promises lenience if the north bends knee." Benjicat Ryswell spit upon the rushes. "Bends knee? To a sow who butchered our king and now hunts a girl? The neck would swallow her knees first." Lady Dustin's dark eyes flicked to Sansa, unreadable. "She is still queen," she remarked. "Her swords outnumber ours 10-1. Every Bolton spear stands with her." At the name Bolton, heat flared behind Sansa's ribs, though she kept her face still. She had not forgotten the festering flayer who loped in her nightmares. Lord Wyman braced thick elbows on the chair arms. "Numbers won't matter when the snows grow high and the southern roads impassable. My scouts report drifts already chest-deep at Moat Cailin. If the lions march, winter will march harder." He turned to Sansa. "My lady, what say you? Is it time the north remembers?" Silence stretched. Snow hissed against shutters. Sansa's breath clouded before her. She thought of Tyrion's last words. "I shall be your cloak of invisibility," of Jon's far wall, of Bran lost beyond it, of the bones that once warmed Ned Stark's crypt. She thought of Arya, of the whispered reports Manderley's singers brought of a wild girl in hounds' company. Maybe lies, maybe not. She thought of her mother bleeding into a river under twitching heartstrings. A girl could drown in such thoughts, but wolves swam rivers when they must. She rose. "My lords, my lady, captains," she began, surprised to hear her voice fill the long hall clear as horns on the battlements. "You know the fate of my father, of Robb, of my mother and brothers. You know the Red Wedding was born of southern treachery, and now another lion's feast has spilled blood, but not Stark blood alone. Lord Tywin sits the stranger's board because I placed justice in his cup." Murmurs rippled. Even Lady Dustin's brows climbed. Davos exhaled slow, steady. Sansa did not falter. "I poisoned him as he sat fat with victory. I plunged the south into chaos so the north might breathe long enough to rise. If you fear lion claws, remember, their head is gone. And when a beast loses its head, it thrashes, blind and wild. That is our moment." She swept her gaze across them. "Grant me swords, ships, and the banners of my house. I will sail to Bear Island, to Deepwood, to the Rills. I will call every forgotten levy. I will write Jon Snow that his sister lives and winter needs him now. I will give our people a hope greater than fear." For an instant she saw her own shock mirrored on their faces, heard her heart beat like a smith's hammer against ribs. Then Benjicat Ryswell slammed his fist upon the long table so hard the candles jumped. "The North remembers," he roared, and others took it up. The captains first, then Mira Reed's quiet voice, then Lady Dustin's low oath. Wyman Manderley's grin split his face from ear to ear. "Tidings sweeter than song," he boomed. Heed me, then. I pledge 500 knights, 1,000 foot, and every ship in my harbor to hail Sansa, Stark Lady of Winterfell. I will loose my singers to carry her name along every frozen river." He planted a seal upon parchment already drawn, its wax still warm. As writ, cheers shook rafters. In the tumult Sansa felt trembling begin in her knees, but it was not fear. It was the mountain quiver that comes before an avalanche. Far to the south, dawn seeped pale through the ragged shutters of a rundown inn atop the Rosby Road. Snow here was only a thin crust over brown earth, yet cold wormed into bones through cracked mortar. Tyrion Lannister hunched near the hearth, cradling a mug of watered ale while Bronn whispered dice curses with 2 mercenaries over a cask. 3 nights beneath flea-ridden thatch had soured the Sellsword's mood, but no southern rider had passed them, nor any raven flown overhead. Varys' secret path had spat them into a world strangely hushed, as though the realm itself paused to draw breath after Tywin's fall. Tyrion took a slow swallow, tasting ashes. His father's face still flared behind his eyelids each time he dared close them, eyes bulging, lips violet. He had not killed the old lion, but some twisted part of him whispered that he should have. Now the deed belonged to another, a ghost girl he might never see again, and his spite tasted of envy. Bronn ambled over, boots crunching stale rushes. "Roads clean all the way to Wendwater," he said. "1 gold cloak patrol, but we pass as spice traders." He jerked a thumb at the barn where their wagon sat draped in burlap sacks of dried orange rinds. "Them guards don't know cinnamon from shit." Tyrion finished his ale, wiping foam from beard. "Wendwater carries us to Duskendale. From there, a Myrish cog." He fingered the jewels sewn into his belt lining, the last of Casterly rock he would ever own. "Soon the narrow sea will swallow our tracks." Bronn grinned. "I like seas. Fewer walls hiding arrows." A hush fell as the inn's rickety door banged open. A cloaked figure ducked through snow-dusting shoulders. The innkeep shuffled forward, but the stranger ignored him, stalking straight to Tyrion's hearth. From beneath the hood, dark eyes glinted. A scar traced one cheek like a pale rivulet. "Eunuch sends greeting," the man said, a Volantine accent. He pressed a folded scrap into Tyrion's hand, then turned and left without so much as warming his fingers. Bronn's knife was halfway free before the door thudded closed. "Friend of yours." Tyrion unfolded the note. A single line in tidy hand. "The wolf sails north. Guard your own pelt." Underneath, a sigil sketched hastily in ink. 6-pointed star of the faith. He felt blood drain from cheeks. Cersei's spies already at his heel, or Varys' final warning. Either way, the pace must quicken. He crumpled the note into the hearth, watched flame lick it to ash. "Tell the driver we leave within the hour," he said, "and see the horse team fed poppy seed. We run through night." Bronn's grin was all wolf. "I am Lord. Long roads make for fat purses." Tyrion stared into the firelight dancing on blackened brick. "The wolf sails north." Somewhere in that phrase fluttered hope, but hope was as treacherous as snowmelt. He clenched the jade lion still pinned under his tunic, souvenir of another life, and tossed back the last of his ale. In King's Landing the pyres burned 3 nights straight. By the 4th dawn, ash draped the rooftops like gray confetti, and the smell of cooked flesh clung even inside the great September's marble vaults. Queen Cersei barred the Red Keep's eastern gate, executed 6 cellar keys for whispering, and poured gold upon the faceless men's rumored contacts. But no Sellsword yet returned with Sansa's head. At sunset she convened the small council in the Tower of the Hand, Father's Tower, its chambers hastily scrubbed but still stinking faintly of his corpse. Prince Kevin sat stiff-backed beside Pycelle. Qyburn hovered like a lank bat behind her throne. Marjorie Tyrell attended under courtesy, perfumed and serene, with her grandmother silent at her elbow. Jaime stood to the side, golden hand resting on sword belt. Cersei unrolled a fresh scroll dripping scarlet wax. "Raven from Maiden Pool," she said, voice clipped. "Lord Mouton reports a smuggler's cog stolen and 3 guards bribed with coin bearing Manderley stamp. The traitor flees north by sea. Marjorie's lashes fluttered. How unfortunate the guards could be bought. Perhaps your grace might pay better wages. Cersei ignored the barb. She is harbored by that whale Lord Wyman, no doubt fattening his dream of independence. We will teach him famine. She swept cold gaze over council. Lord Admiral, how many galleys can sail within a fortnight? But the royal fleet lay half-burned still from Blackwater. Her ships were patchwork. Kevin hemmed and hawed. Olenna murmured of grain shortages. Jaime urged caution with winter snows. Our words crawled across Cersei's skin like lice. She slammed the table. Enough! If ships will not serve, ravens will. Send word to Roose Bolton at the Dreadfort. The wolf bitch lives. Let him loose his bastard south. Flay Manderly's banners, steal his sons. Whatever pleases him so long as the girl's head gifts my wall. Kevin's face blanched. Roose Bolton is no dog to leash. If we give him license, he may carve deeds we cannot defend to the faith. Let faith choke on snow, Cersei hissed. Write the letter. Pycelle's quill scratched reluctant parchment. In the shadow behind, Qyburn smiled thinly and whispered to his queen of iron men being forged in black cells, of a champion rising anew to defend her cause. Her nails bit palm at the promise. Snow fell heavier the farther north the sweet sister crept. In the sheltered docks of White Harbor, Sansa oversaw the loading of Wyman's flagship, North's Hearth, a broad-beamed carrack refitted with roof deckhouse and an extra stove by order of the cook who swore no man marched on empty belly, least of all in winter. Beneath tarred canvas, barrels of salt pork, bacon, cherries soaked in brandy, and sacks of dried beans filled every alcove. More precious still were the bundles of arrow shafts, fletched by the harbor bowyers all night while snow piled upon the quay, and the stacks of leather jerkins sewn with interlocking iron plates. Crude proof, but better than cloth. Mira Reed arrived at dawn astride a shaggy horse, leading a column of tall green men in mottled cloaks. They bore oilskin-wrapped bundles, spears of weirwood tipped with poisoned bone. Gifts from Greywater, she told Sansa, her smile bright despite raw wind. Smooth the way through bog and barrow. Benjicot Riswell's riders escorted a herd of shaggy marsh cattle, hooves muffled by snow. Lady Dustin sent less meat and more men. A score of mounted archers with black-painted bows. Her message arrived pinned by knife to the captain's wheel. Steel for wolves. Keep it sharp. By the third day, the harbor resembled a honeycomb of activity, every cell humming with purpose. Singers roamed the wharves, casting ballads across the water so each echo carried rumor of the new she-wolf come to win back Winterfell. The North remembers, they sang, and the snows know her name. Small folk passing through paused, eyes shining. Sansa spent hours among them, tasting salt on wind, listening to fishwives speak of flayed men along the King's Road, hearing sailors mutter of iron-born raids. She tucked each fear away like knives in a belt. Tyrion had once taught her, power is a shadow on the wall. To command it, learn which fears cast it long. Here, fear wore many faces, Bolton, lions, cold, hunger. If she could become their opposite, hope, warmth, shadow might bend to her. At night, she met with Wyman scriveners drafting letters in secret code. Crooked little rhymes easy to remember yet meaningless to spies. Each letter would travel with Mira's green men, sliding between watchfires unnoticed, until Deepwood Motte, Oldcastle, Skagos. Each bore a single phrase. A wolf speaks. Gather at the rills upon the new moon. 10 days after her arrival, the North's Hearth cast off under a bleak gray dawn. Sansa stood on quarterdeck as coils of hawser thumped into water. Davos saluted from the pier. He would remain to shepherd Wyman's southern trade. Snowflakes danced on the rise of the tide. When sails bellied, White Harbor's bells told one slow knell. Farewell or blessing, she could not tell. But as the ship knifed through dark water and the river mouth widened, she felt again that strange tremor in her bones, the shiver of mountains before they slide. 200 leagues south, Peter Baelish coughed up seawater onto the slimy boards of a Braavosi whaler. Freezing wind knifed through the sodden velvet of his doublet. His coin pouch was gone, crossbow lost to the river, but his smile, thin as a garrote, remained. "Pulled that one under the boom chain," a sailor remarked in the guttural tongue of Lorith. "Nearly tangled in barnacles." The ship's master, a narrow man whose left eye was a milky pearl, jabbed a thumb toward the bilge ladder. "Hairy crab cages need mending, Greenblood. Earn berth or swim again." Peter dragged himself upright, coughed once more, and set to work with silent malice. Sansa Stark, clever, lovely Sansa, had shoved him into the Blackwater like a sack of stones. Yet stones sank. Littlefinger floated. In time, this ship would berth at Gulltown or Sisterton, and from there he would crawl spider-like across webworks only he had spun, until once more he perched above the realm on silken threads. A wolf might learn to bite, but spiders rebuilt. He closed his eyes, picturing a northern girl in a gray cloak, picturing her kneel before some fat lord who promised safety, picturing lions sharpening knives. All threads tangled north now. When next he set foot on land, he would follow them. At the rills, the tide smelled of rot and broken ice. Sansa disembarked beneath a sky the color of hammered iron, breath steaming, boots crunching through drifted kelp. Lord Roger Riswell's long hall squatted squat and dim above the beach, yet its windows shone firelight, and banners already snapped from roof beam. Horsehead sable on field bone, flanked by a white banner daubed hastily with a rough gray direwolf. Inside, 200 souls crammed shoulder to shoulder beneath rafters crusted in smoke. Stout men in patched mail, women with knives on belts, bearded trappers smelling of pine tar, crofters clutching spears older than their fathers. They looked up as Sansa entered, and a hush rippled out like frost over still water. Firelit faces turned, some hopeful, some suspicious, some hardened by grief until hope was itself a weapon to test. She strode to the dais, trusting her legs though they trembled. Behind her marched Mira Reed, Lord Wyman's eldest Ser Wendell in scale hauberk, Lady Barbary's black-capped archers. They formed a crescent at her back.
Sansa lifted no sword, wore no crown.
Yet when she spoke, her voice filled the hall. "I am Sansa of House Stark," she said, "first daughter of Lord Eddard and Lady Catelyn, Lady of Winterfell by right of blood. I bring the North a choice. Bend again to southern knives or rise as one pack." She cast her gaze from face to face. "I do not come with empty hands." She beckoned. Mira stepped forward, dragging a heavy burlap sack. She spilled its contents. Iron rings, some small as child's wrist, some large. Every face flinched. Flensing rings from the Bolton kennels, cut by reed raiders from abandoned crosses along the King's Road. Sansa took one ring, raised it. "They left these to rot in snow. A warning. Here is my answer." She flung it into the hearth. Iron hissed, flared red. One by one, men and women stepped forward, seized a ring, hurled into flame. A chant rose, low and rust-rough. Noose for noose, blood for blood. When dawn broke, smoke curled from the long hall chimney, carrying into pale sky the last bitter tang of iron. Over the hearth, soot revealed a pattern burned into backstone. The direwolf of Stark, scarlet black on gray. In King's Landing, smoke of a different sort drifted over the Blackwater as ironborn longships set torch to merchant cogs within the mouth. Cersei's galleys scrambled, half-manned, ill-repaired, only to fall prey to hidden scorpions on the far bank. When the Queen heard, she smashed a wine flagon against the map table, sending Tyrell lilies skittering across painted boards. "First the wolf, now krakens," she snarled. "Is the realm come to ruin?" Jaime spoke soft beside her. "Father would spread gold. By silence first, then blades. Father is ash." She wheeled on him. "Are you ash too?" "I am your brother," he said. "Let me ride north. Parley with Lord Bolton." "Bolton is my hound now," she snapped. "One hound at a time." But Qyburn's black eyes gleamed. "If krakens worry your grace, why not set lions loose upon their den? A swift strike at Lordsport while the Greyjoys raid south will end this nuisance." Cersei's gaze sharpened. "Who commands?" Qyburn bowed. "I hear Ser Gregor lives still within the black cells. needing only a spark to reignite his flame. Jaime's mouth opened, but no words came. Cersei smiled. Snow fell thicker at the rills, yet within the long hall, hammers rang day and night. An old smith of Barrowton shaped sheets into direwolf badges. Mira's green men carved weirwood javelins. Captains stitched sails bleached gray to blanch banners upon the waves. By the second new moon, 3,000 men and women had answered Sansa's call. A ragged host, but each carried a name for vengeance. Wyman's knights arrived on fat destriers hung with sea-green caparisons. They brought wagon loads of dried lamprey pies that steamed pepper sent into morning air. Ryswell cavalry rode in, leading 24 captured Bolton scouts bound hand and foot. At dusk one evening a girl in ragged leathers crossed the camp alone, dark hair hacked short, a scar across brow. In her belt hung a slim sword of Braavosi steel. She stood before Sansa's pavilion flaps and whispered a single word. Needle. Sansa's heart near burst. She seized Arya, her sister, grown feral and thin but eyes still gray-bright, and they clung while campfires crackled around them. Later Arya spoke of hound and faceless men, of crossed rivers and wolves that howled in every dream. When dawn came she donned a surcoat sewn hurriedly with white direwolf and strode to Drill Yard where she beat 3 grown men in quick succession. Hope spread through the camp like dawn through cloud. On the day the banners were at last unfurled, gray, green, sable, brown. A lone raven descended upon Sansa's war table. Its scroll bore the black seal of Castle Black, cracked by cold. Jon Snow sends greeting to his sister, it said, and to the north he will come at the head of 200 seasoned rangers. For winter is here, and we must fight beneath one banner or die beneath 10. Her knees found the frost, but tears were hot on cheeks. She rose, lifted the letter to the crowd outside, and told them the wall itself marched beside them. Their cheers shook snow from eaves. Under first light, drums sounded. The host began northward, through marsh and bog, across white rivers studded with floe ice, skirting the smoking ruins of villages Bolton men had pillaged then abandoned. Wherever they marched, more rose from hidden crofts, farmers with scythes, maidens with skinning knives, old men who had sworn for Brandon the Boisterous and would swear again now. Songs followed. The snow falls white, the wolf takes flight, and lion's roar grows thin tonight. At Deepwood Motte they found Asha Greyjoy's banner still flying, but her men hailed the she-wolf and offered oatcakes, bitter beer, axes. Asha herself clasped Sansa's forearm. "I never cared for Bolton," she said through a crooked grin. "A flayed man makes poor company." By silent accord the ironborn ships joined Wyman's flotilla. With coast thus secured, Sansa turned inland, eyes fixed on the smoking spires she half remembered. Winterfell, where hearths lay cold and the gods would wept. In Dorne, the sun baked bone-white sands as a dwarf in dusty turban unhitched himself from a salt camel outside Sunspear's outer gate. Tyrion Lannister squinted up at the ochre towers against blinding sky, feeling sweat sting the scar across nose. He had traded one hell for another, but here among red mountains he sensed fresh pieces on the board. House Martell's long-nursed vendettas, dragons rumored across the sea, whispers of a Targaryen girl with silver hair. Inside the shadowed hall Prince Doran sat upon wheeled chair, gout-swollen feet wrapped in silk. He regarded Tyrion with mild, watching eyes. "My sister would feed you to vipers," he said. "Why come?" Tyrion offered a thin smile and laid before the prince a sealed letter bearing the lion's sigil split by crack. Cersei's own words offering half a realm if Dorne delivered her brother's head. Then he set upon the tiled floor another letter, this one bearing a single direwolf. "The north rises," Tyrion said softly. "Lannister gold buys only blood now. Align with lions, drown in snow. But ally with the she-wolf and the imp, and the south may one day burn the dragon banner again, unopposed." Prince Doran's long fingers curled around the parchment. He read once, twice. Outside, hot wind rattled bead curtains. At last, a slow smile unfurled. "Perhaps we discuss in the water gardens," he murmured. Shade and fountains loosened tongues, and so new threads twined. Shadow on wall shifted. Weeks later, Sansa's army camped upon the rise overlooking Winterfell. Snow shrouded the ancient towers, drifting breast-high against the burned-out walls Ramsay Bolton had never bothered to mend. Black smoke from cooking fires rose sluggishly within, but the ramparts showed few men. Bolton banners drooped sodden with rime. In Sansa's command tent, maps weighed by daggers, she consulted Jon Snow. Taller, sterner than the brother she had known, cloaked in black edged with hoarfrost, and Arya sword balanced against knee. Mira Reed traced swamp routes with finger. Wyman spoke of siege engines. Asha spun a dirk and suggested walls mattered little once gate burned. But it was Jon who met Sansa's eyes and quieted the tent. "We take back what was ours the day we were born," he said simply. "No tricks, no flaying. Let the Boltons taste true northern justice." Dawn broke pale rose across snowfields. Trumpets sounded, Manderley's deep shell horns, reed-bone flutes, the harsh cry of ironborn war horns. Phalanxes moved, shields biting frost. From Winterfell's gate a single figure rode forth beneath white flag. Ramsay Snow, bastard-made Bolton, eyes bright as broken glass. He dismounted before Sansa's line, smiling. "Little bird," he called, laughter in every syllable. "Come back to the cage?" Sansa nudged her mare forward. She wore no helm, only the circlet Jon had forged of direwolf teeth and silver. Snowflakes caught in her hair. "This is Winterfell," she said. "Not a cage." She drew her dagger. Ned Stark's, found in the crypt where it had lain all these years, and tossed it into snow halfway between them. "Yield and kneel, or bleed and die." Ramsay tilted his head, grin curdling. "Your father's knife cannot gut what you cannot catch," he said. He wheeled his horse, galloped back. The gate slammed shut. Arrows whistled. Siege horns roared. Snow exploded beneath running boots as the North charged its own stolen home. Inside the battlements, chaos bloomed. Bolton men scrambled along parapets, but many had grown soft on stolen grain and softer still on fear. Iron-born swimmers crept through the frozen where pond culvert, knives between teeth. Mira's green men emerged from shadows of burned stables, silent as dusk. Archers loosed from behind broken battlements while Asha's axemen battered at the main gate. Within an hour the timbers splintered. Ramsay's hounds bayed, muzzles frosted crimson. Jon Snow led the first wedge through, Longclaw gleaming pale fire. Arya springing at his side like dancing shadow. Sansa watched from rising ground, banner in fist. Bolton pink men broke. Some fled, some threw down arms, some clawed at the gate only to find reed spears waiting. Ramsay himself fought atop the great keep stairs, blades flashing twin arcs. He wore no helm, only a bastard's arrogance. When Jon's sword rang against his, sparks hissed on snow. They circled, wolf and flayed man, until Arya darted in, needle snicking Ramsay's thigh. He staggered. Jon's boot hammered chest. The bastard tumbled down 6 stone steps, sword skittering. He landed upon his back before the doors of the old hall where once Eddard Stark had held court. As he crawled, wheezing, Sansa walked through the shattered gate, direwolf banners snapping behind. She stood over him. He spat blood. "Stark bitch," he hissed. "You'll wear my collar yet." Sansa knelt, grasped Ned's dagger from her belt. Steel kissed air once. When it came to rest, Ramsay's eyes stared upward, unblinking, as snowflakes melted on lashes. She rose. For a heartbeat the courtyard was all muffled hush. Snowfall, distant crackle of torches. Then a roar built, overflowing ramparts. Ryswell and Reed, Manderley and Ironborn, black brothers of the Watch. Sansa climbed the steps of the great hall. Inside, soot-scoured stones smelled of ash, but the heart tree's roots still twined beneath, and somewhere far below a hot spring murmured. She strode to the dais, turned. Jon joined her, sword red. Arya leaned on Needle, eyes gleaming with wild joy. Behind them, Rowan fire cast shifting light. Sansa's voice rang, sure now as the walls that had stood 1,000 winters. "Winterfell stands," she declared, "and the pack survives." Outside, Wolves began to howl, real wolves, their throats lifting from the dark woods beyond. The sound rippled through courtyard, tower, ice-slick roof. Men and women stood stunned, many weeping openly as the chorus rose. Snow kept falling, soft and silent, but in its hush the north remembered. Ash cooled, spears lowered, fires banked for warmth not war. Sansa lowered her head, whispering a promise to every bone in the crypt below. Your daughter is home. Across the narrow sea, on a terrace of gilded marble overlooking green water, Tyrion Lannister paced before a silver-haired queen whose dragons dozed in sun-warmed pits. News of a she-wolf's victory would reach Meereen in time, he knew. It traveled faster than ships these days, on lips of merchants and in dreams of freedmen. And when it did, alliances would shift like sand. For now, he spoke of lions dethroned, of spiders scattered, of the long cold marching south. Daenerys Targaryen listened, fingers stroking a dragon's scaled brow. When he finished, she said, "The realm is breaking." He shrugged. "Broken things may need mending. I have some skill with glue." She laughed. A sound like wind chimes in warm storm. And the north? Would it bow to Dragonfire? He met her eyes. "Wolves bow to no one," he said. "But they may feast beside those who keep their word." The dragon lifted its head, nostrils steaming, as though scenting distant snow. Within Winterfell's Godswood, Sansa knelt beneath the ancient heart tree. Red leaves fluttered about her shoulders, sticking to cloak, to hair. Blood-red eyes watched, inscrutable. She closed her own eyes and listened. Water bubbling from hot spring veins, wind sighing through stone, distant echo of children playing near newly rebuilt kitchens. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to unclench her heart. Steps crunched behind. Jon knelt beside her, laid a hand on damp moss. "Father would be proud." Sansa smiled, lashes wet with cold. "Mother too, though she'd pick dirt from my hair." Jon chuckled softly. They sat in silence until wind stilled. Finally Sansa spoke. "There is work yet. Cersei will not forgive. Bolton clans still haunt Dreadfort. And the others." Jon's gaze darkened. "I ride for the wall come dawn. Stannis marches to join us. We need every blade." She took his hand. "We will send them, and when the cold is beaten, when spring blooms we rebuild. Grain stores, bridges, hope." Snowflakes melted on their joined fingers. In the white hush she heard the slow heartbeat of Winterfell. Stronger now, steady. Beyond the wall of pines, campfires glimmered against night, red jewels in dark velvet. Wolves howled again, but this time the sound was not mourning nor hunger. It was the song of a pack reunited, claiming sky and snow as birthright. Sansa rose, brushed leaves from cloak. "Come, Lord Snow," she teased, the old childhood name tasting sweet. "The North needs its king in black." Jon stood, squeezed her fingers. "Lady of Winterfell." They walked back toward the castle, boots crunching in fresh-fallen snow. Overhead, clouds parted, and the pale face of the moon looked down upon walls no longer broken, upon banners stitched with direwolves snapping in a free wind, upon the slow unfurling of a new dawn. Behind them, the heart tree watched in scarlet silence, and in its sap-sweet whisper the old gods murmured that winter might be long, but spring followed always, even in the north, even for wolves. PGSQL. Snow lies velvet thick across the broken tiles of Winterfell's eastern battlements, turning every jagged edge to soft white humps so that, from a distance, the scars of siege scarcely show. But beneath the hush the fortress bustles like a smithy at noon. Hammers clatter on roof slates, old hinges shriek as they meet new oil. From dawn until the last torch gutters, teams of small folk and soldiers haul rubble clear of shattered towers, every stone stacked for rebuilding as soon as the thaw will allow mortar to set. Sansa Stark walks those ramparts twice each day, once at sunrise, once at dusk, her cloak whipped flat against the wind while she studies progress room by room. She pauses at the tower where Bran once dreamed of flight. Masons have laced fresh timbers through the cracked facade, but the net of scaffolding is patch job only. A true rebuild must wait for summer, and summer feels as distant now as songs of dragons through warm Dornish air. She turns northwest, eyes drawn past the outer wall to where a low hoar-frosted barrow marks Ramsay Bolton's final grave. No cairn crowns him. Jon let the wolves have his bones. New growth of red and black nightshade sprouts in the churned earth. Poison will have poison, Arya said with a smile when she first noticed the plant. Sansa feels no urge to tear the shoots away. It is fitting that the bastard of Bolton nourish nothing but deadly bloom. Below, in the courtyard, Arya drives a practice spear at Mira Reed in a blur of leather and ice breath. They circle, each mirroring the other's feints so closely the watchers call them river reflections. When Arya's twist finally lands a tap beneath Mira's ribs, the onlookers erupt, Ironborn banging axe hafts on shields, green men hooting like marsh herons, Stark guards voicing long wolf howls. Mira bows with a grin, sweat steaming from her hair, then beckons another challenger. Ser Wendell Manderly, towering and merry. Every small contest here is no longer play. The wall has sent more ravens. Whites mass in numbers unseen since the long night. Jon writes that giants of ice batter at Eastwatch's outer palisades. That a storm of blue-white blizzard hides things too large for words. Samwell Tarly adds narrower script beneath. The dragonglass from Dragonstone helps, yet numbers grow. Send men, stores, hope. Hope. Sansa crumples Sam's letter in a gloved fist as she descends the spiral stair toward the Great Hall. At the landing, she passes fresh-hewn shields stacked in neat rows, centered with the dire wolf new painted. Hall doors grown wide at her touch, spilling warmth. Rush-strewn flagstones, trestles laid with trenchers of mutton stew, 2 huge kettles of brown ale. Lord Wyman holds court amid the clatter, lecturing a knot of carpenters on the correct slope of a Wintertown roof. Every third sentence he punctuates by sampling a honeyed pasty from a tray that never seems empty. At the high table, Jon studies a rag-and-bone map of the gift. Tiny oil lamps mark the castle still manned. Taller tallow pillars burn where giant corpses lie frozen across the main track. Beside him, Davos smooths another parchment. Princess Shireen's neat cipher counting wagon Stannis pushes south behind him. 300 cavalry, 2,000 ragged sellswords, 70-odd Baratheon banners bleached near white by ice glare. Stannis marches slow, Davos says as Sansa reaches them. Armor cracks when it freezes, and half the sellswords won't leave their braziers. Yet the king will reach us. He taps the map an inch north of Last Hearth. We meet here in 9 days if the gods stay sober. And if they drink? Arya's voice lilts behind Sansa. She's slipped in, still breathing hard from sparring. Then we shorten the march, Jon says. Send supply sleds north, force march our best. The wall falls, all the realm follows. Sansa folds Sam's message flat again, lays it between them. We need more than men. Sam writes that Dragonfire shatters the Ice Walkers fastest. The Night's Watch cannot mine enough dragonglass. Jon's eyes flick up, gray, rimmed by sleepless bruises. Then dragons we must have. Across the narrow sea. Morning sun paints Meereen's pyramids molten when Tyrion Lannister, doublet dusty from 9 days' ride, crosses the Queen's private terrace. Smoke wisps from the scales of the dragon lying dozing by a marble pool. Each breath puffs ash across palms and perfumed water. Daenerys stands before the beast, one hand on its brow, as unafraid as if she stroked a hound. She does not turn until Tyrion kneels. A raven this dawn, he begins, rising only when she nods. From Sunspear by way of Volantis, Prince Doran has weighed my plea, a flicker at the edge of her mouth. And he offers ships, 20 dromons, 30 sail of lighter draft. He offers grain, stores hidden against Lannister blockade. And one more thing. Tyrion produces a sealed letter, the wax stamped with the coiled serpent of House Martell. He offers a bride. Daenerys breaks the seal. Her eyes flicker line by line, then narrow. He names himself. Prince Doran Euler Martell requests marriage to Queen Daenerys. Tyrion's shrug is small. A marriage to Dorne wins you a foothold on Westeros without first blood. It sends a dagger into Cersei's flank. And if I wed no prince? Then choose another. Tyrion meets her gaze. But wed some realm. The north rises. Cersei bleeds. The time to sail is now or never. A roar splits the air. Viserion lifts his head. Eyes the size of Tyrion's fist flaring molten gold. Flames lick between black iron teeth. But Daenerys soothes him with Valyrian lullaby. She hands the letter to Tyrion. Ready the fleet. I will speak to Doran in person when we make landfall. Tyrion bows. Behind his lowered lashes, he pictures white snows under green flare of dragon flame. Imagines Sansa's quiet eyes widening as the world she upended answers with fire from a distant shore. Winter's claw soon grips the barrows south of the wall hard enough to crack iron. Jon's vanguard reaches Queen's Crown midday, sun no more than pale smear behind sleet, and finds the tower abandoned. Burned pitch pots toppled from parapet crust the snow where last season children played at nights. Hard beside the well stand 6 headless corpses spiked on pikes. Their hands skinned bare of flesh, finger bones gnawed. Jon counts them silent. He will remember faces later when he kneels to the gods. By dusk they push on. 40 rangers on shaggy northern garrons, 100 green men scouting the bog edges, 200 manderly bowmen striding knee-deep drifts. At Jon's side rides Ghost, head low, eyes glowing like coals through whirling snow. Each time the wolf snarls, Jon's hackles rise. White's near, always near. That night a horn blast drifts over the blizzard, thin, wailing. Eastwatch, but sound bends strangely in storm and could as well be the night fort. Jon calls halt, orders wheelabout for the big ridge torches. No flame holds in the gale. Sparks hiss out like tears on hot steel. They dig wind walls, huddle cloaks, chew dried horse meat. All night, snowmelt trickles into boots, freezing their toes to stone. Toward false dawn, Mira Reed shakes Jon awake. In the half-light, her face looks carved of ice and green willow. A rider, Lord. She points beyond camp. Across the white gloom, a lone horse picks its stumbling way, rider leaning sideways, shape stiff as carved birch. Jon and 2 silent sisters run. Ghost bounds ahead. They find the mount's belly ripped by frost fangs, entrails trailing like red ribbons. The rider once wore black cloak of the watch. Now the cloak hangs frozen across shoulders of a corpse gone blue at lips. Within fingers stiff as icicles he grips a leather satchel. Jon slices straps. Inside, a bundle of charcoal sketches, hasty, quivering lines. He spreads them on Ghost's broad back beneath lantern light. Giants wrapped in chain, pale spiders big as hounds, and one sketch of something stranger. A man, or once man, robed in tattered maester's chain, leading a shambling column of corpses across a cracked river where the water steams upward into clouds of hoarfrost. On the back of that sheet, the dead ranger's last words blot the parchment. They carve the hot river with cold. They ride it south. Jon folds the grim proof. We march at first gray light, he says. At Winterfell, Sansa receives a raven scrawled by Maester Aemon's trembling hand. His writing failing yet still precise. Others breach Eastwatch. Jon rides to meet them. Send what heart you can spare, or meet death alone inside warm walls. She calls her council in the solar above the glass gardens, where winter roses bloom pale beneath panes crusted with frost. Arya arrives still mud-flecked from fast ride. Davos smells of stable. Wyman Manderly carries a fresh jug of frost wine he sets untouched on the sill. Sansa plants her palms on the long oak table. If the wall falls, every victory here means nothing. Asha Greyjoy leans on elbows, braids swinging against Brigandine. And if we ride north, Cersei sails up the Mander with sail sails and cuts our throat. No, Davos says softly. Stormland's ravens report Cersei's fleet locked in port, masts ice-thick, and there's rumor through smuggler nets. Daenerys Targaryen has left Meereen. Sailors swear 3 black wings shadow the stepstones. Wyman's bushy brows rise like snowy peaks. Dragons. Rumor, Davos repeats. But rumor can warm even freezing men. Jon must hold until they come, or until we break the others ourselves. Arya smirks. How many ice giants can a dragon eat? As many as the fire in its belly lasts, Sansa says. She looks to Wyman. Provision for 10,000 for weeks. Done, he answers without hesitation. We'll make wagons of wind if need be. Sansa turns to Davos. You ride south to White Harbor. Dispatch every longship with grain and fire oil tunnelly tight. We meet Stannis's van at Last Hearth in 7 days. Arya whistles low. If snow drifts like featherbeds, we'll hack a road with axes. Sansa's gaze sweeps them both. Then fetch axes. At Last Hearth, torches on the gatehouse burn green. Wildfire kind, fused with pine pitch that hisses and spits. Jon's vanguard arrives dead-eyed. Half their garrons lamed. Hearthfolk line the walls with stones for want of arrows. Children clutch cleavers too heavy to lift. Within the yard lie 3 bodies bound in chains of red-stained linen. Giants once, their skulls cracked open by dragonglass hammerheads. Jon kneels where the heat of their blackened blood still warms the snow. Light them, he orders. The watch's pyre masters build a quick mound. 1 spark, 1 pillar of flame. Even in full daylight, the air warps with dragonglass shards hurled into firestorm. Stannis arrives at dusk, banner torn half its length, half his men frostbitten. Yet his voice is firm as the weir logs. Snow, you now command 2,000 more. Burn the bodies you found half buried on your flank. My scouts report nests of whites just 3 hills west. Jon's answer is only nod. He has no time for salutes. Ravens circle overhead, restless, as if sensing prey soon. The cold bites deeper. 3 nights later, the first wave comes in hush so heavy even Ghost seems to drown in it. Snow stops falling. Wind stops blowing. Torches won't stay lit. Shadows gather beyond the ring of pikes. And then, like glass cracking, all stillness shatters. The white horde slams into the embankments. A river of dead hands clawing, teeth snapping. Among them stride shapes twice a man's height, ice-sworn giants with tree trunks of frozen bone for clubs. Behind their line gleams faint cerulean glow. The others themselves, skin shimmering moon-white, swords thin as fear. Steel shatters on that glass. Only dragonglass or fire matters. And men have so little fire. Jon's command tent becomes triage. Every heartbeat he sends another runner to forward trenches. Another cart laden with wildfire flasks. When dawn bleeds pink, he climbs the palisade and sees the field carpeted with bodies. Brown, black, Bolton, Stark, Sellsword, Wildling, face to face with corpses of centuries past. The snow is red, but the wall to east still stands, a glimmer of white-blue beyond range hills. He dares hope. Then horns sound from rear. Riders crest the south ridge under gray and white banners. The northern hosts, Sansa's columns, 3,000 strong, with Asha's Ironborn flanking on the frozen riverbed and Wyman's carts rumbling under spiked roofs. At their spear tip rides Sansa herself, cloak snapping, crown of direwolf teeth bright under rising sun. The sight drives white ranks to frenzy, yet mortal men roar louder. The living surge, dragonglass bites, wildfire explodes green along the flank. Mira's spear circle topples an ice giant. Manderly knights trample through ghouls like oxen through brush. Ghost leads a pack of shaggy northern wolves that tear dead throats as though they still bled. On a rise, Jon and Sansa meet amid clang of steel, helm to helm, fingers clasping through frost. No time for words. He points to the ridge where the blue riders mass. 12 white walkers on pale steeds carved from rime. Sansa nods once, races to rally the archers and calls for the fire oil wagons. The battle lasts till moonrise when the others at last will north, their dead host collapsing as they retreat. Silence follows so sudden it feels like deafness. Snow resumes its gentle fall as if the sky itself sighs in relief. Fires smolder in heaps of bodies. Green flame guttered, red coals dimming. But the living still stand. In that quiet, Jon finds Sansa kneeling by a wounded green man, binding his stump with her own cloak. Blood soaks her gloves, but her hands do not shake. Jon lays a hand on her shoulder. We held. Tonight. she answers, voice raw. But they will come again. 2 weeks later, the combined northern army limps through a pass southeast of the shivering forest, pursuing the retreat northeast, unsure whether to give chase or entrench. Food dwindles. Thaw turns snow to slush pits that swallow horses to the hock. Scouts return saying the others have vanished, like breath on glass. But ice spiders weave webs across the frozen lakes, hinting at their path. Then, on the 15th dawn, a roar unlike any thunder rolls across the sky. Men drop axes, stare upward. Shadows flicker beyond cloud, immense and sinuous. A beat of wings parts the overcast, and 3 shapes eclipse the sun, streaming contrails of white vapor. Dragons, black and green and cream gold. Each beat of their wings drives gale-force wind into camp, throwing snow into swirling pillars. Beneath the largest sits a silver-haired queen in scale-dark armor, banners of 3-headed dragons snapping at her saddle. Daenerys lands beyond the rear barricade where Jon and Sansa wait, flanked by rangers and Manderly knights. Steam curls from dragon nostrils. The scent is brimstone, warm as summer on their faces. Tyrion dismounts behind his queen, strides forward. "We arrive late," he calls over the wing beats, "but with heat enough to melt your foe." Daenerys swings down, eyes shining with something like wonder at the snow, the northern hush. "Queen Daenerys Stormborn offers alliance," she says, to Sansa first, then Jon. "Fire and ice together to break death itself." Jon glances at Sansa. She steps forward. "Lady of Winterfell accepts. Break death, then break those who offered us to it." Daenerys smiles, a thin line, but genuine. "Then let us make war songs for minstrels unborn." Preparations are swift. The shattered field at Last Hearth becomes staging ground. Dragon pits hollowed in the hillside, barrels of wildfire laced with Valyrian glyphs, dragonglass heads fixed to new ash shafts. Tyrion pores by torchlight over Samwell's treatise on legends of the Dawn Age. Davos coordinates grain from White Harbor. Arya leads infiltration raids on White Nests, slipping in and out like shadow amid twisted trees. But still no sign of the Night King. Some say he waits for deeper snows. Others claim he rallies giants at the foot of the Frostfangs. Whatever truth, Jon refuses to sit idle. He proposes to strike first, torch the lake valley where ice spiders nest, cut the Night King's southern path. Daenerys agrees. At dawn she mounts Drogon. Rhaegal and Viserion rise with her, each ridden now by Dothraki blood riders, hair stiff with rime. Jon watches sky blacken beneath their wings and prays old gods bend to new fire. The dragons return at dusk, bellies streaked with ice crystals. Daenerys' armor dented where thrown spears of frozen bone glanced away. "Too cold," she gasps, dismounting. "Flames crack in that wind like glass. We burned nothing." The Night King stands on lake ice so thick even dragonfire skitters. Sansa clenches fists in cloak folds. "Then we lure him south to softer snow." "How?" Tyrion asks. "We give him what he wants," she answers. "Me." Silence. Wind howls round the ridge. Jon steps forward. "No," he says simply. "He hunts the last Stark blood," she counters. "He will chase that blood across fields if it bleeds enough. And if it stops bleeding?" Davos murmurs. "Then dragonfire finds him in the open." Sansa meets Daenerys' eyes. "Will your beast come when I call?" The queen studies her a long moment, then nods. "He flies to fire." Next evening Sansa rides under Parley Banner toward the half-frozen marsh 2 miles beyond the Old King's Road. A company of whites trails at the periphery, blue eyes glaring, but they hold distance. The Night King steps from gray swirl onto crusted ice, pale sword angled downward. His face shows no breath, no life. Only frost crystals glitter in the hollows of his brows. Sansa dismounts. She wears no armor, only her father's sword belt and a thin dirk of dragonglass. She drags the blade across her palm as she walks, crimson drops steaming in cold. On windless hush her voice carries, "End this hunt. Take me. Spare my people." The Night King lifts a hand. Snow devils swirl. Dead men lurch forward. On the hill crest Jon's hidden archers tense. Bodies are tinder, but the Night King is the spark. Aim must be true. Tyrion stands beside Daenerys, one hand on Drogon's harness strap, the other raised to signal. Snow thickens, moaning. Sansa kneels, pressing her bloody hand to the ice. She whispers wordless plea, old gods, new, dragons, direwolves, anything. The Night King glides nearer. The cold radiates ahead of him, crawling across ice toward her like living mist. Then Ghost howls. A high wolf cry splinters the hush, and from the pines pours a river of fur. The Winterfell pack, grown wild, eyes like coals. They streak across snow, hamstring the first rank of whites. Chaos erupts. Sansa rises, flings her dirk. Dragonglass whirls through storm, misses, clinks on ice. The Night King extends a hand toward her throat. Drogon's roar shakes the valley. Black silhouette dives through cloud, jaws fanning torrent of fire laced with wildfire green. Flame meets cold. Air shatters in CRA. King thunder. Ice steams, then screams, then melts in sheets. The Night King staggers, cloak aflame. His sword lifts in reflex, but Jon's arrow flies from ridge guided by Sam's maester measurements. Dragonglass head, fletch of white raven quill. It spears through flame, through blizzard, through ancient breastbone. Blue eyes burst white. Frost armor fissures. The Night King shatters, shards spinning like hail across the lake. His army collapses in domino swaths, each white dropping limp as marionette with cut strings. Silence. Only the rush of wildfire hiss on steam. Sansa stands trembling on slush as dragons circle overhead, their fire painting sky amber. Something inside her, fear, grief, hope, fractures then mends in one heartbeat. She kneels again, pressing her bloody palm to new-formed water, and feels heat there, real heat. Weeks later, banners of Stark and Targaryen fly side by side above Winterfell's gates. Snow still falls but melts faster on stones now warmed by forgework and dragons roosting on the ridge. Thorn-growth nightshade withers where dragon flame sweeps the yard, replaced by first hardy shoots of dogrose. Couriers rush in constant stream. Dorne's fleet anchors at Old Town bearing grain. The Vale's young Lord Robert writes offering knights under Lady Royce's stern guidance. Even Riverrun's Blackfish sends word that Frey banners burn along the Trident. Lannister power shrinks to a red blot around Casterly Rock and the ash-streaked Red Keep where Cersei broods, half her mind lost to wildfire fumes. In the gods would Sansa and Daenerys walk beneath red leaves dusted white. Snow melts whenever dragon shadow passes overhead. They speak of many things: grain routes, Dothraki fear of cold, Tyrion's plan to send ravens carrying parchment soaked in wildfire to break Cersei's navy. But often their words drift to softer ground. Fathers lost to blades, mothers to betrayal, the burden of crowns upon narrow shoulders. At parting, Daenerys presses a carved obsidian ring into Sansa's healed palm. For winter, she says, and for truth cut into shadow. Sansa smiles, closes fingers round dark glass. For spring, she answers, and for storm-turned seed. When spring finally creeps north on shy green feet, crocuses push through black soil around the heart tree, blooming purple against white bark. Arya sniffs them, crinkles her nose. She has no love of sweet things, but plucks one anyway, tucking it behind Bran's ear as he watches crows swirl from the broken tower. Bran no longer travels east in wolf dreams. His legs remain still, but his eyes see farther than any maester's lens. He foretold the ice spiders 8 nights before they scuttled from dark. Now he speaks of rivers thawing and ships under striped orange sails. Below, the new market stirs where once only rubble lay. Potters salvaging dragon-scorched clay to craft green-streaked urns. Smiths making nails from melted bolt and chain. A brewer selling dark ale he christens Night King's Bane. Laughter echoes in courtyards again. Cynical still, but laughter. Sansa stands atop the gatehouse on the first true warm day, cloak packed away for the moment, hair unbound to lift in mild breeze. She watches children chase pups across yard mud, hears Tyrion barking orders to a stonemason about Targaryen heraldry placement. Not above the direwolf, Fool. Beside it, equal. Jon climbs the stair. He wears black still, but the stark cloak atop. Raven from Casterly Rock, he says, holding ribbon-bound parchment. Cersei will treat. Sansa raises a brow. She will. Yield Lannisport. Keep the rock. Jon's mouth twists distaste. Demand her brother returned unharmed. Tyrion's voice floats up. Unharmed, certainly. Unbound. Another matter. Sansa smiles thin at the joke, but her gaze wanders south, past memory, past the sky itself. We go, she says at last, quiet and sure. Jon studies her profile. No longer the soft-faced child he left at King's Landing, but granite carved by wind. We, fire and ice both. She nods at dragons lazing on distant ridge. We end what began before we were born. Jon breaths fogless breath. First of the year. Then tomorrow we ride. Far below, wolves howl. Not hunger, not fear. Only a song carried on air sweetened by new thaw. Children howl back, giggling. And Sansa allows herself one deep inhalation, as though she might keep that sound in her lungs forever. Winter is not done. Storms will come again, ice will bite, and men will die. But the north stands, dragons will overhead, and snow, at last, begins to melt.